One of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the Marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
~6. Happy Wednesday, one and all. Mark Dolan with you, in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. And breaking this morning, better late than never. After 10 days, HMS Dragon sets sail for Cyprus. But is the Iran war a tale of Britain's national decline? A pro-Iranian regime hate march to be banned? Common sense or an assault on free speech? And it wasn't in the manifesto, but Sir Keir Starmer is doubling down on his plan to roll out digital ID. But do you want it? Will this government use technology to track your every move? Well, this one will boil your cornflakes this morning. A fresh diversity row as business leaders boast that in the years ahead there will be fewer white people on their boards. Is that progress? When did racism become acceptable? 1 in 4 migrants now drawing universal benefit. And will Rachel Reeves show motorists at the pump a bit of mercy? And as the government rolls out free school meals for more families, is it the state's job to feed our children? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Damien's on the phones today. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note. And as the saying goes, let's talk. So much to go at. Leave us a voice note, by the way, because we know you're busy. You're getting the kids ready for school. Maybe you're in the van already on your way to work. You could be at the tail end of a shift. Whatever you're up to, we salute your efforts and your contribution to the unstoppable powerhouse that is the British economy. Look, folks, a big 4 hours. Get the kettle on. We have got work to do. We'll start with today's front pages. Daily Mail, ban pro-Iran hate march. Well, that is an old headline because this has been banned, a pro-Iranian regime march, which was planned for this weekend, is not going to happen now. And I think it's the right thing, because I've got to tell you that I'm a libertarian. I am the biggest... You know, whatever goes. As long as it's within the law, you do you. However, what you've got is a regime which kills its own people and wishes death to the West and calls the United Kingdom Little Satan. So I don't think we should allow the right to protest of a group that calls Britain Little Satan and wants to wipe us off the face of the earth. That would be my free speech red line. What do you think? The Guardian newspaper, the last stop before hell. Tehran residents say attacks are intensifying. You can see the left-wing media already sort of shifting the little tectonic plates against this war. The left, by the way, they're the good people. They're caring, they're kind. Are they not happy to see the fall of a regime that's murdered upwards of 40,000 people in the last few months for protesting their government and killed millions over the years, of course, murdering one woman for not wearing a hijab correctly? Zaghari Ratcliffe urges PM to stay out of Iran war. Of course she does. The Times newspaper, US bombers take off from Britain for attack on Iran, which, as our executive producer Christian Mitchell pointed out, Starmer says no to any support at the beginning of the war. Simply air bases for refuelling. Starmer says no. Now he's all in. Make it make sense. He's contradicted himself. And of course he's pleased no one. Classic Starmer. Also in the Times, we should believe all sex abuse victims, urges Queen Camilla in an important and welcome intervention. Daily Telegraph, Trump ramps up bombing of Iran. But will it be another Vietnam? The Sun newspaper, Barton victim blinded. Ex-Prem ace held after attack. We won't go to that. It's an ongoing legal case. Folks, so much to get through. Who better to do that with than a Fleet Street legend, a man that has edited some of the biggest newspaper titles in the country, one and only Neil Wallace. Good morning, Neil.
Good morning, Mark.
Good to see you. I hope you've had your 3 Weetabix this morning.
I had 4.
Oh, I can see that. You are cooking with gas. Where to start? HMS Dragon finally sets sail 10 days into this war. Better late than never.
Better late than never, but blimey, the idea that we are reduced to this, we can't even get a warship into a zone. Did this happen without any warning? Did we have no idea at all? They don't read the papers? What's the matter with them?
The Prime Minister has known about America's ambitions for at least 6 weeks.
At least. And it was plain, as they used to say, as plain as the nose on your face that something was going to happen. So why don't you react proactively and actually think we need to move something there? But they sort of sit around and they dream that it's not going to happen because they don't want to believe it's going to happen. And Starmer, yet again, listens to some whinging, whining legal voice from his Attorney General and says, no, we're not going to... it's not lawful. Well, all those murders that were going on the streets of Tehran, where those people were seeking freedom, that wasn't justification for moving in any way.
A regime that would like to destroy Britain and calls us the Little Satan.
Absolutely. And you can't go into details, but just this week there were arrests made as a result by terrorism police about suspected Iranian activity. The Iranians have fueled death and destruction and murder and terror across the world. They are a vile regime. And the idea that we sit and hide behind some spurious international law and say to the Americans, no, you can't refuel your planes in the bases that we've agreed you can have, is just ludicrous. And yet again, Starmer makes us look ridiculous. I have a son-in-law who's currently working in the Middle East, and he texted me the other day to say Britain just looks weak, off the pace, and not important, not relevant, when everything's happening in the world and we can't even move one warship and get it in place.
OK, well, let's find out just how much progress HMS Dragon is making. It's 6:09. Our executive producer is Christian Mitchell, who's probably the most experienced commercial speech producer in the country. Christian, where is this ship now? Has it reached the Mediterranean? Mark Gale, get yourself on air. Where is it now? Is it close to Cyprus? I would assume so. The Isle of Wight? That's like on my doorstep. That's not great, is it? Neil Wallace, the HMS Dragon is on the Isle of Wight. Probably they could stop at Shankly, where there's a very nice B&B.
There's some good chip shops there as
well.
Yeah,
there's a big hotel, I think it's the Imperial, it's got a pool table.
Oh, well.
Yeah, so maybe the sailors could have there's 200 people on that ship. It set sail. Neil, it set sail yesterday, because I saw it on the news wires, and it's now at the Isle of Wight.
Are they rowing or are they using their engines?
I wonder about that. Well, thanks to it's actually one of Ed Miliband's big new ideas is human-powered vessels.
Well,
so, yeah, what you've got to do...
They used to be called slave galleys.
Yeah, exactly it.
Maybe we could get some of those migrants in the little boats to actually start doing their bit and putting a bit of energy back into the country.
Well, that's it. I think it's an amazing source of national pride that we've got the first eco-friendly, zero-carbon warship. And it's a sight to behold, actually. Like you said, you've just got men in the galley. And back in the day, it used to be people of, minorities and, the bottom end of the economic. Now, because of Labour government, it's actually high-earning white men that are down there doing it, which I think is the right thing.
But you know that we had a warship in Gibraltar, which is slightly nearer Cyprus than where HMS Dragon was. But it had been completely mothballed. Do you know why? Because we couldn't afford to actually refuel, and it didn't have a crew because we couldn't afford to feed them.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, to actually feed our own crew. It's come to that, and that's by the way, if you're just joining us, obviously we're so happy to be on the radio, DAB+, in-app and on online. Thank you for listening. If you want to watch the show, head to YouTube and search Talk, and you may want to because we've got a live tracker of where HMS Dragon is. I thought it would be approaching Cyprus by now. It's at the Isle of Wight. And that's, by the way, it's been at sea for many hours now, about 12 hours it's been at sea. This is pretty extraordinary. I've got to ask you, Neil, is the Iran war, is it a tale of Britain's national decline?
I think it's a... to a certain extent, yes, but what it's worse is it's a tale of the determined decline run by people like Starmer.
Now that's interesting. You're saying this is by design rather than by accident.
Yeah, I think they've got their own agenda. I think what they care about far more is maybe the votes in inner cities, which we will come on to the Al-Quds March later. They're more concerned about that than they are about doing the right thing for the world and for this country. As I say, my son-in-law sitting there in the Middle East saying, what the heck is my country doing?
Well, the decision
and the answer
by...
is nothing.
Well, nothing, that's exactly right. Or as you imply, worse than nothing, actually, having a negative impact on our national self-interest, such as refusing access to UK air bases for American planes who simply wanted to refuel. But now Starmer's pleased no one because suddenly he's got more involved in this war. Therefore, he's going to alienate the British Muslim vote, and he's also alienated all the people that value the special relationship. As usual with Starmer, there are no winners.
Yeah, he's alienated a bloke called Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump's the most powerful man in the world.
It's not a good idea, is it?
And it's just, the thing about Starmer is, as always, he is so short-sighted. He cannot see beyond the end of his nose. He cannot see about tomorrow. He cannot see where this will lead if he takes this short-sighted, myopic view. It's just, it makes you shiver to think that this is the man running the company. Do you know the next thing that makes you shiver is if they did depose him, who do we get then? If you look at the Labour Party, you think, where is there a big figure? Like Tony Blair was a big figure.
Most definitely.
Gordon Brown was a big figure. They had serious big hitters in the Labour Party at that time. Who have you got here? You know, they've got about one or two in the cabinet, but in the main, nothing.
Well, you've got Ed Miliband, whose career ended in political failure 10 years ago, which is the most unwelcome comeback since I don't know who, and then you've got Angela Rayner, who's still involved in a tax battle with HMRC, who are going to rule on whether or not she followed the rules. You couldn't make it up, could you? And like you imply, Starmer's replacement will be worse.
that's the catch-22 we are in now, and that's what he's depending on. That's what he's depending on, and saying to his enormous majority in the House of Commons, after me, what?
Well, it's very perceptive that you say that, because a Westminster insider told me yesterday morning that they think actually we're stuck with Starmer, because what they're hearing is that Labour cannot settle on a replacement that they all agree with, and that therefore the fudge might be just the devil you know. Partly because, Neil, it's been priced in that Labour are going to be eviscerated in May, so it won't be a shock anymore.
Exactly. The trigger has gone, as it were. You know, they had a chance to get rid of him, but they couldn't settle on who it might be. And so they're sort of running forward, and then they're going, oh, hold on a sec, and retreating backwards as fast as they could go. And they are in a complete pickle. And I believe Starmer will be there until the end of the term. I don't think he's going anywhere.
Well, what people go on.
Because he has a skin that's so thick that he doesn't care. He will just sit there. All he wants to be in the seat of Prime Minister. He's going to have less and less power, which means Britain has less and less power, because you have to have a leader. And he isn't going to have it, but he's going to sit in that seat and tinker around at the edges, and we're going to get definitions of Islamophobia coming into the law as he panders to that base over there. We're going to see constant impotence, but he won't care because he's still sat in number 10.
Well, I completely agree with you, and I think that he's a stubborn and thick-skinned man, as you've said. He's also dogmatic, and he's ruthless. I mean, this is a guy that will lie through his teeth to win power. He pretended to be a Corbynite when he got elected as leader of the party. Yeah. He then told the British people in that manifesto, which is the greatest work of fiction since War and Peace, that he wouldn't raise taxes. There was no mention of digital ID or scrapping jury trials. So the man is duplicitous. He doesn't care. He's a little bit like Boris Johnson. It's kind of the world king scenario. He just wants that top job. And I think you're right that we should not underestimate his determination to keep it.
Yeah. He won't go. And don't forget, he probably has the power, if he so chose, to call a general election. What would happen if there was a general election? So many of those Labour MPs are going to the dole queue. They'll have to get in line behind all of the migrants who are claiming universal benefit, as we're going to come on to later. But they're just not going to act.
They are not going to act, indeed. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. 1 in 4 migrants now claim universal benefits. 6:18, this is Talk Breakfast.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCown.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle's from Suits, that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beers, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.20 Talk Breakfast. Mark Dolan in for Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. Lovely to have your company. And breaking this morning, better late than never. After 10 days, HMS Dragon sets sail for Cyprus. But unfortunately, my elite team of producers have noticed that it's still at the Isle of Wight. This from Michael in Birchington in Kent. Good morning, Michael. I hope you're very well. Michael says, good morning, Mark. Good morning, Neil. Regarding HMS Dragon, reported position was 12 hours ago off the Isle of Wight. Get a listener to look out of the window to see if it's still there. The transponder has probably been turned off once clear of narrow waters, and its position is now secret, as you would expect for a warship going to war. Well, Michael, let's hope that's the case. Sam says, Mark, the Pompey to Ryde Isle of Wight ferry only takes about 35 to 45 minutes. Perhaps the Navy should use car ferries instead. Yeah. Or what about the Royal Caribbean or P&O helping us out? Because they know how to charter ships, don't they, Neil?
Yeah, they do that very well. Yeah, they'll get us there.
Have you ever been on a cruise?
I have indeed.
It's a good lifestyle, isn't it?
Yeah, I can do some of that.
A friend of mine got in trouble with his missus because it was a week-long cruise in the Caribbean. He didn't get off the boat once. He lived at the bar. Their marriage is now, let me tell you, under pressure. We've also got another big development, which is a pro-Iranian regime march. Is to be banned this weekend. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has yielded to the request of the Met Police to ban this thing because they said the policing of it would be simply unmanageable. Here's a voice note from Wayne. Hello, Wayne.
Good morning, Marky. So, the protest being banned, not because it's free speech, but because it's been proven to be backed and organised by Iranian states. I wonder how the left feel about that. Are they going to be like, oh my God, we've been duped by a terrible regime? Or are they going to be like, oh my God, they're stopping our freedom of speech and they're stopping this, missing the complete point that they've been absolutely led down a garden path. All of this Palestine, Iranian protest in Malarkey is all funded and is all backed by terrorist states, and the stupid left are too blind and goddamn ignorant to realise. Keep me going today, Marky boy.
Wayne, thank you for your spirited, wonderful, wonderful voice note. Keep them coming. We're going to get through lots of those this morning. What do you think about this, Neil? Do the left have a blind spot when it comes to the war in Iran? They should hate the Iranian regime. It places women as second-class citizens and murdered one particular 22-year-old for not wearing a hijab correctly 3 years ago.
It shows the internal difficulties that the current Labour Party has, because this is exactly the sort of regime that Keir Starmer should be leading marches through the streets of Britain saying, bring it down, bring it down, bring it down.
Bingo.
It offends and outrages in every way. But the problem is that there is big populations, particularly in our cities, that they care about more because they have votes. And all he's interested in, all the left are interested in, is power. Forget the idea that they're for the small man. They are absolutely not. They are controlling. All they want to do is to be able to dictate to the masses. They're not interested in looking after them. Their interest, it's about how to have power. And that's what you're absolutely seeing with the problem that you have, the appalling pro-Palestinian marches that have been allowed to march and drown our cities and bring them to a stop and to terrify ordinary people from going on the streets.
Especially Jews.
Especially Jews. This is driven by anti-Semitism, and I just think that this shows it in huge relief that this argument, that this is even an argument. I tell you what the parallel is. There used to be something called the IRA. There used to be the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Can you imagine a pro-IRA march going through the streets of Britain, being allowed at the time of them being actively attacking our country? Would it have been allowed? No, it wouldn't. And what you're seeing here is British bases has already come under attack once. We're having to go past the Isle of Wight at the moment, chugging along to try to get a warship out there. But NATO is having to look and protect our back to try to fend off these same mad mullahs who are determined to destroy us if they can. Why would we allow this insult, this outrage? These people hate Britain. They hate our society, the fantastic society that looks after them and welcomes them into our country and protects them, and yet they want to march and destroy us.
What you've highlighted in that extraordinarily pertinent monologue is the selective morality of the left. And it's only on their terms and when it suits them. And as you said, it all relates to being in power, nothing more.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, a classic microcosm of this is the gay groups who have been demonstrating in favour.
Do you mean the Queers for Palestine?
They're the ones.
Oh, I'm a member actually. Yeah. I'm one of the Queers for Palestine. Yeah.
Who would have?
Because they're great. They're great company. Yeah. Yes. You should see me with my rainbow makeup.
Yes.
It is. These people are so incredibly stupid, so ideologically captured. They don't realise that should they be in one of these regimes, they would be chucked from the highest rooftop.
That's exactly the point, isn't it? You know, how many gay pride marches did you see in Gaza? How many gay pride marches are there in Tehran every year? How many gay pride marches are in the Hezbollah areas of Lebanon? Zero.
I'd also like to ask you, well, there's a reason I'd like to ask you, especially in regard to the Iranian regime. We've seen the female footballers in Australia of the Iranian team demonstrably not wearing their hijab, and at least half of them now enjoying asylum in Australia, which is a good example of the positive aspect of asylum because they can now be safe. Where are the Western left-wing feminists speaking up for those girls? What's happened? Deafening in their silence.
The same sort of extreme feminists who are completely silent about the women's rights in Britain when it doesn't affect them. They're the wrong side when they get the wrong side of the track. You mentioned the young girl who was murdered in Iran, simply for not wearing a hijab properly, a headdress properly. And that goes on day in, day out, week in, week out in that country. And the left don't care. The left don't care because it's ideologically, it suits them to get behind these regimes, to support them. You know, you look at the pictures that are in the papers of the previous Al-Quds marches and you see the unions that back them, you see the university groups that back them. Do you remember that kid who came up with at Oxford University? He went on, he created a chant about killing the IDF. He still hasn't been dealt with.
Yeah, the Israeli Defense Forces, of course, who were responding to October the 7th, biggest single attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. Anything that's anti-Western, anti-America, anti-UK, anti-Israel is something that the left jump on and embrace. And even if it's a murderous, evil regime, perhaps the most wicked since the Third Reich in the form of the Iranian regime, they are all in. Well, what I will say, and you'll agree with me on this one, we see you.
Absolutely.
And we will call out your wicked double standards.
Yeah.
And the idea that the left have appropriated the notion of we're the good people, good luck with that, Neil.
Do you know that in certain areas in the north of England, local councils have distributed guidance to schools warning that some kinds of drawing, of singing, of dancing are offensive to some areas of Islam. So you must be very, very careful in case you allow little 7-year-old Johnny and 8-year-old Geraldine to actually dance and play and sing songs, because it could offend.
So bacon, alcohol, dogs, and now music and dance.
Yes.
We add that to the list of activities.
And drawing.
Is that right?
Yes.
All right, and I've got to take you up on one thing, though, at 6:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. This is quite a big story, Neil. How many 8-year-olds called Geraldine these days?
I think that's a really valid... Do you know what? I thought that as I said it.
You dug that name out of the vault.
Where did I get Geraldine from?
There's a few 80-year-olds called Geraldine, but let me tell you, let me salute you, because I think it's time to bring it back. It's a very, very noble name, Geraldine.
Yeah. Yes.
And if there's any Geraldines listening, give us a call and tell us what it's like. 0344 499 1000. Before we get to the break and more front pages, what about this headline? And it's quite extraordinary. 1 in 4 migrants claim universal credit. Now, I'm confused, Neil, because I was told that mass immigration is really good for the economy. How can it be if 1 in 4 migrants require state benefits to exist?
The important point in this thing is that these are migrants who've been given permission to stay. These aren't the ones living in the hotels, all of those hundreds of thousands of people. These are the ones who've been told, OK, we'll have you. You can stay here.
This is policy.
This is policy. And the numbers involved. You know, we say 1 in 4. What does 1 in 4 mean? Well, I'll tell you what 1 in 4 means. It means that under the government's own statistics, there were 179,482 non-EU migrants.
Wow.
Claiming, with settled status, that's the vital phrase, claiming the universal credit in December.
Extraordinary.
179,000. Which means that of these settled status, there's 4 times that. That's 800,000 people have been given settled status, quite apart from the ones we're still processing.
Well,
where do they live, Mark? Where do they go to the doctor?
This is the
Where
truth.
do their children go to school?
And you're right to point that out, because it will go beyond universal credit. They're going to be requiring all elements of state support in order to go about their lives. And of course, we don't demonise or belittle them. They've taken advantage of an overly generous system. You and I would do the same if we'd come from a poor country, but it's not our job in the United Kingdom when we've got poverty here and the cost of servicing government debt, interest alone, 100 billion. We can't afford this. And the big lie that diversity is our strength in terms of mass immigration, which has actually, it's not been our strength because we've got divided communities. And similarly, it's not an economic good either. The idea that immigration is good for the economy is provably untrue.
Well, you look at the effect of lifting the 2-child benefit cap. There were some families that are going to get 5-figure pay rises, as it were, because they've got so many children. Now, how many of those are migrant families? The truth is, many of them are. And you're quite right. It's because the system is so weak. It is so laden, driven by some kind of bizarre guilt, that we have this welfare benefit system. Are you surprised people are taking advantage of it? If I saw a free parking space, would I park in it? Yes, I would, even though I can afford to pay for a parking ticket.
Of course.
But that's that's human nature. But the idea that 1 in 4 of these people who've come here, who are non-EU migrants, 179,000, are all on universal benefit. So that's you, me, and more important, probably the listeners of this programme, the viewers of this programme. They're paying for that.
We've been sold a lie, folks, and a day of reckoning is coming. Nigel Farage thinks there'll be an emergency election next year following an economic collapse. Who knows? But change is coming. Bring popcorn. Here's a voice note from Andy on the current state of our military.
Morning, Mark. Andy from Hull. I'm just thinking back recently with Starman saying that he's going to send all of these troops, boots on the ground in Ukraine, and send money to them and send troops and bombs and guns and tanks and ships and planes to support Ukraine, whatever it takes. We'll give them whatever they want and all that. But when it comes to it, I think it looks like we've got a pea shooter and a catapult to defend ourselves with. So the only weapons it sounds like we've got is weapons grade BS, mate, because it ain't what they're telling us, is it? Something don't make sense. Have a good day.
Weapons grade BS. Who could argue with Andy? Neil.
Brilliant. I tell you, doesn't he bring together two big stories there brilliantly? So we've just been talking about those amazing benefits numbers. Incidentally, I'd missed the fact that from December to January, it had risen by almost 50,000 more, incidentally.
It's a ticking time bomb, isn't it?
Right. So all that money pouring in to 222,000 non-EU migrants on benefits, and we can't even fund one warship to limp from the UK round to Cyprus to protect our own bases. We can't even afford to, we have to mothball ships because we can't afford to pay for feeding the sailors that are on them or the troops who are manning our helicopters and so on and so forth. Our biggest gesture so far is we've sent four jets to Cyprus. Have you looked at those American aircraft carriers? What they've sailed halfway around, literally halfway around the world, dozens upon dozens, and long after the fact of all this, we've finally flown 4 warships out there to protect us, their acrotery against drones.
Well, it's a brilliant point. Is the Iran war a tale of Britain's national decline? Next up, a couple of really big stories, more front pages, but also jury trials look like they're going to be scrapped. What are the implications for justice in this country? And something else that wasn't in the manifesto, ID cards. Are we going to get them against our will? That's next. It is 6:37 Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:39. Listen, I've got to tell you, I have an elite level team because Nehar is directing our TV output. If you want to watch the show, head to YouTube, search Talk and up we pop. It's a TV show. You get to see how devilishly handsome Neil Wallace, Fleet Street legend, is. The years have been kind to him, partly because of all those big fat payoffs. Let me tell you, this guy, the drinks are on him. Talking about failing upwards. No, I'm joking. Listen, we've also, Mark Gale is our lead engineer, Christian is the boss. Damien's taking your calls. And we also have Cal, who is a very important member of our TV team. And he's got the perfect headline, if you're watching on YouTube at the moment, about Britain. all at sea. And I think in 3 words, he's summed up where we are as a country. By the way, folks, I will never talk us down. And I believe that this project, this country of ours, this can be rescued. But it's going to take seismic change. And in my view, it's going to involve the wiping out of the entire establishment. The media establishment is dying. And what you've got coming up, like Fresh Green Roots, Talk, and other brave brands. And same thing's going to happen in Westminster. I confidently predict it. Massive, massive story that we need to get to next. And it is as follows. The Prime Minister's plans for ID cards will make it easier to claim benefits, according to the Mail newspaper. The problem with this ID cards policy, Neil Wallace, is it wasn't in the manifesto, and it seems like a lot of people don't want it.
It's intrinsically anti-British somehow, isn't it? You know, with the idea that the idea that they can monitor us, and the idea that I'm walking down the street and for some reason I step into the road and don't walk in quite direct, and you, as PC Plod or a local law enforcement person, they now have sort of wardens in West London where I am, and they can ask you, who are you?
Is that right?
I don't want to tell you who I am. Why should I tell you who I am? You've got to show me your ID.
I've done nothing wrong. I've broken no law.
Yeah,
you don't have a warrant.
All of those things. But they will be entitled, and as sure as eggs is eggs, these things grow. You know, that old phrase about it grows like topsy is absolutely right. A bit of power gets taken ever higher, ever bigger, and they will use it to monitor us. They will use it to say, you can't go there. Why were you there? Why did you do this? And all of it will be tracked on a card. To a certain extent, we have it already with credit cards, don't we? You know, if you go to the supermarket knows what Martin Dolan is probably going to buy, and you could ring ahead almost and tap a thing, and it will have it ready for you.
Jacobs Creek, Cronenberg 1664.
Well, I prefer
Oxford Landing, which, let me tell you, is not a university.
Yeah, or a TV show.
McCain oven chips is about the healthiest thing you'll find in my basket.
Yeah.
But yes, but we joke about it, but it's actually got serious implications, and it's a scandal that it wasn't in the manifesto. If it was such a good idea, why can't you be proud about it and own it? Now, do you think this is Starmer trying to establish some kind of legacy, mindful of the fact that he could be turfed out later this year? He wants something to show for it.
I think that's possible. I reiterate that I don't believe he will be turfed out later this year, because they haven't got anybody to replace him with, unless it's the bacon eating or the failure to eat bacon Ed Miliband. Do you remember that picture?
So bad.
He couldn't even negotiate his way around a bacon sandwich. That's the level we're talking about as a potential next Prime Minister
Pigs will fly.
of this country.
Pigs will fly if he becomes Prime Minister, right?
Yes.
He's smoked already.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a silly sausage. Folks, we don't have time for this.
Well, you do.
But I mean, it is this is what your contention, and this is, decades in journalism tell you that actually Starmer's going to cling on for dear life, and he may actually prevail and live to tell another day.
Yes, and one of the things they're using at the moment is the idea of how will the markets react if he goes. Well, all the markets really care about is the fact of stability. They don't care what kind of stability. They're not making a political statement. They just want it to stay the same so they can continue running with the way things are. So it will settle down. Do you remember Liz Truss and how the world ended in her brief time as PM? What happened? The world got stable again. The world carried on.
And isn't that the truth? Next up, jury trials look like they're going to be scrapped. What say you? This is a complex legal area. The government argue it will speed up the process of justice. Some rape victims have waited 5 years for their day in court. Is there any merit to this? Even if it speeds things up by 2%, is it worth it?
I have stood in the dock of the Old Bailey, facing trial, facing a prison sentence. I'd been under arrest for 4 years until I got my day in court. The sentence that another journalist got was less than a year. I would have been one of those who would be caught in this now, whereby a judge sat up there and he made the decision. The jury cleared me. The jury declared me innocent after 4 years. I thank the jury on the anniversary of that day every year. Lammy, this government, wants to take away that possibility of a jury sitting there and cutting through an establishment stitch-up, as it was, and declaring, no, we're not having that. So, you know, the idea... Was this in the manifesto, incidentally, that they were going to do this?
No.
So, yet again, this is a cataclysmic thing they are going to do. How many years, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of years, we've had the right to be tried for our alleged crimes by our peers. And they're going to take that away? It somehow is yet another sort of microcosm of how they view the world. Don't sort it out. Legislate to make it the way you want, to make it go away.
And the salami slicing of our culture, our history, our traditions and our institutions. Yeah. 800 years we've had jury trials. Well, this is, without overstating it, for me, a moment in my broadcasting career, because it's 6:46 on Talk and I'm in the studio with an extraordinarily experienced journalist who is telling me that he would likely have a criminal record now and may well have served time in prison.
Almost certainly.
If it wasn't for the jury process.
12 good people and true sat there, discussed it, debated it, looked at the evidence of a month-long trial while I stood in a dock in the Old Bailey for a month, and they said no. And they set me free.
And it's possible, we can never be sure, that a judge that was given this responsibility may not have shared the politics of the newspaper for which you worked, may not have looked kindly upon its famous Australian owner, and that may have swayed the result.
If you will remember the time, it was a huge political football.
Which news to the world and in relation to allegations about how stories were gathered and whether that was legal or not. That was really the story, right?
Yes, it was, yeah. But it was also about how the establishment, the legal establishment, decided to turn on the media. And you remember the trigger to it all was the great expenses story in the Daily Telegraph they broke about MPs' expenses. And that triggered the backlash that led to that day. But I'm sitting here without a criminal record because of the jury system.
Well, it's a devastating testimony from you, and there, but for the grace of God, go any of us to be judged by a politically biased, judge, lawyer, establishment stooge, rather than, as you said, the judgment of 12 of our fellow citizens who have a brain on them, common sense, and are not biased. Let's take a listen to Geoffrey Cox, of course, a top former Conservative minister and leading lawyer in this country, about this policy of scrapping jury trials.
Pause long and hard before we encroach upon this fundamental principle. I have seen it work in practice over 40 years. As I've said, I have never failed to be awe-inspired by the sheer quality of attention and fairness that a jury brings to its deliberations. Summary justice can never replicate that. We are about to take a step that will irretrievably damage the quality of justice in this country.
So right.
Very powerful. And I've got to say, Neil, I was very moved by you telling us what you've been through and how essentially jury trials guaranteed your freedom and guaranteed, by the way, the correct verdict. And you were acquitted. How about this? If this wasn't enough to make the Prime Minister think again, and old mastermind himself, David Lammy, then nothing will. It is Labour MP Charlotte Nichols, who's a very, very impressive person, a very decent person, and she suffered the most appalling attack. And she has said that this policy will do her no favours at all as a victim of rape. Take a listen to this.
As after being raped at an event that I attended in my capacity as a Member of Parliament, I waited 1,088 days to go to court. It is because I have been raped that I'm as passionate as I am about what it means for a justice system to be truly victim-focused. It is because I have endured every indignity that our broken criminal justice system could mete out that I care what kind of reform will actually deliver justice for survivors and victims of crime more widely.
I'm afraid this is another government-sponsored slow-motion car crash. Absolutely disgraceful, absolutely shocking. Lots more to come. And folks, this is a really important issue because many of you are on your way to work in a van or a car. Some of you have dared, you've got the temerity to drive your kids to school. Why? Well, because otherwise they'll get mugged and stabbed and have their phone nicked off them. So when is Rachel Reeves going to show motorists a bit of mercy? Well, Reform UK made quite a splash about this yesterday. We've got the inside stories. 6:50, this is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.50, when is Rachel Reeves going to show motorists a bit of mercy? We're joined live at 8 a.m. by Reform UK's Shadow Chancellor, Robert Jenrick. Lots of messages coming in thick and fast. Matt, good morning, Mark. Just thought I'd get an early message in, wishing you a positive day in light of all these ridiculous happenings that are going on within our country and globally. At least the Dragon has been unleashed. He's referring, of course, to HMS Dragon, which has finally set sail, although apparently it's still only at the Isle of Wight. Let's hope that this has some effect in protecting our people in Cyprus. But I really want to write in regarding these marches. Of course, these are the pro-Iranian regime marches that the Home Secretary has banned for the weekend. I want to understand if it's factually correct about universities in London planning pro-Iranian marches as well. If the others are being banned, why is this happening? It's a disgrace. Well, Matt, I've got to say our universities are completely ideologically captured. Anything that's anti-Western, anti-British, anti-American and anti-Israel, they are all in. And here's the kicker, you and I are paying for the privilege. Let's take a voice note from Chris on the situation in Iran.
Morning, Mark. Chris from Epsom. For me, there is only one question today. Why has Starmer still not prescribed the Muslim Brotherhood and the IRGC? Why? They are terrorist groups.
Well, that's right. The IRGC, of course, are the military, call themselves the police. They're not. They are an army that prop up the wicked Iranian regime. Let's talk now about petrol. And what about this then? Reform UK have been very busy in the last 24 hours trying to urge Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, to support drivers as petrol prices have gone up. I'd like to know, text me or give me a call, how much has the petrol in your area gone up by? Let me know, 03444991000. How about you? When was the last time you filled up the Bentley, Neil Wallace?
Well, the supercharged version or just the normal Bentley.
V8.
Well, funnily enough, I travel a lot around the country. But the petrol station at the bottom of my road has gone up by 8. I was on holiday last week, came back the weekend. Petrol price gone up by 8 pence since this.
That is astronomical.
8 pence. Over £1.40 from down in the mid 130s.
And if you are somebody, a delivery driver, somebody that's, you know, whatever, holding down 1 or 2 jobs to pay the bills, and then you're going to hit, that's going to hit you in the wallet big time, isn't it?
Well, it'll make a huge difference. 8 pence, say 50 gallons of 50 litres of fuel in your car, which is quite a common thing for a family car.
Most definitely.
Times 8 pence, 50 times 8 pence, it's going to cost you another £4.
And can we say...
What could you buy with that £4 when you go to the supermarket?
What could you buy with that? And this is what's critical to convey, Neil, is that for millions of people around the country, many of our viewers and listeners this morning, driving the car or a van is not a choice, they have to.
Well, I spend an awful lot of my time in Cornwall, where I've got family.
Nice.
And you can't exist there without a motor vehicle of some kind. You literally cannot exist there and run any kind of normal life. It isn't a choice. That anywhere outside a big city, frankly, it is not a choice not to have a car.
Yeah.
You need it. So suddenly, on your weekly run around, as you say, you know, taking the kids, going here, taking the kids to school, doctors, or wherever.
Kids aren't safe to walk to school anymore in certain places.
And for many, many families, an extra £4 every time you fill up is an extra burden that really, really hurts. You have to think, am I going to buy butter to put on the bread, or am I going to put it in the petrol tank? These are real life decisions. And Rachel Reeves has no concept of what this means to real, ordinary people.
I think you're right. The Cabinet have never run a business, but they also don't live in the real world either.
That's a vital point. The fact that this Cabinet has, I think, only one person who's ever worked in private industry that does not understand the true facts of economics, where money comes
is it
from.
Lord Timpson, who's, I think, you know, the prisons minister, and
he's not a cabinet minister.
And he's not even in the cabinet, and that's about it.
Yeah, and so he knows about how you have to earn money to pay people's wages. You have to earn the money. It isn't like the civil service, you simply dip into the money that we pay in taxes.
Well, what a thrill and a privilege to have Neil Wallace in the studio. He's been in Fleet Street for decades, of course, and what a moment in the last hour with Neil Wallace explaining that he was in the Old Bailey himself and that he likely would have lost his freedom if it wasn't for jury trials. Pretty extraordinary stuff. Well, you are walking free. The tag's off now as well, isn't it? And I'm delighted to say he's only wanted by our team here at Talk. We'll catch up soon. The brilliant Neil Wallace, broadcasting and journalistic legend. More to come. This is Talk Breakfast.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Top of the morning, 3 minutes past 7. I hope you're well. Get the kettle on, folks. We've got a lot of work to get through. Let me tell you, I can't go anywhere without meeting fans and supporters of Talk. Big shout out to Simon this morning. And I said, Simon, shall I give you a shout out at 8 or 9? He said, no, I'll be at work by then, because Simon is a classic example of Alarm Clock Britain. We're here for you. We're here for it. And breaking this morning, better late than never. After 10 days, HMS Dragon finally set sail for Cyprus. But is the Iran war a tale of Britain's national decline? A pro-Iranian regime hate march is to be banned this weekend by the Home Secretary. Common sense or an assault on free speech? And it wasn't in the manifesto, but Sir Keir Starmer doubling down on his plan to roll out digital ID. But does anyone want it? Or will this government use technology to track your every move? Meanwhile, a fresh diversity row as business leaders boast that in the years ahead there will be fewer white people on their boards. When did racism become acceptable again? Meanwhile, 1 in 4 migrants are on universal benefits. I'd love to know who voted for that one. Wait a minute, I'm so confused. Christian, I thought that immigration was good for the economy. Make it make sense. We haven't been lied to, have we? And when is Rachel Reeves going to show motorists a bit of mercy at the pump? We'll get reaction to shocking rises in petrol in the forecourt with Robert Jenrick live at 8. I've got messages coming in here thick and fast. Vicky's messaged the show. Good morning, Mark. Fuel has gone from £1.29 to £1.60 in Lincolnshire. That is a scandal. Who's got that money? And by the way, don't be having this that the government will imply, especially the woke lefties, that driving a car is a choice. It ain't a choice for most folk. Also this morning, as the government rolls out free school meals to more families, is it the state's job to feed our children? I'll be asking the fearless Anne Widdicombe. My phone number is 03444991000. Text the word talk in your message to 872. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. We're on the radio, DAB+, in-app and online. Perhaps you're listening in the kitchen, maybe you're in the car or at work. You can also watch the show. Just head to YouTube, search Talk and Up We Pop. The brilliant Nahar is directing our television output this morning. So many voice notes. Steve, with an interesting perspective on spiralling fuel prices.
Morning, Mark. Steve from Leeds. Regarding fuel prices, I've just passed a garage, and this is a normal garage. Other week, diesel was 141.9. I've just passed it now, and it's 174.9 a litre. That is absolutely ridiculous and profiteering, because the garage down the road from it is still 148.9. Have a good show, pal.
It's an absolute shocker, Steve. My heart goes out to you. This from Sean. Good morning, Mark. Petrol here has gone up from £1.29 per litre to just under £1.40 in the last 10 days. That's Sean in Bridlington. And let me tell you that this is an assault on working people, right? This government say that they're party of working people. Well, their policies have put up unemployment. So they're the party of working people, putting people out of work. But also, let me say this at 7:06 on a Wednesday morning. If you drive a car, you are a working person. You're a productive person. There are no lead swingers who drive cars. If you have a car and you use it, you are a productive, valued member of society. And what's happened? You've been clobbered by this government. Let's get a bit of common sense across all the big stories of the day. A very good friend of mine, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, no less, and an extremely experienced broadcaster and politician, Nigel Evans. Good morning, Nigel.
Oh, good morning. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. And an outbreak of common sense from the Home Office banning marches in support of a tyrannical regime that would like to kill all of us.
Yeah, I scratch my head as to who the sorts of people are who want to go on these marches. I really do worry about the fact that there would be maybe thousands of people that would take part in a march.
Deluded progressive lefties who are ideologically captured, I would suggest, Nigel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really pleased that the Home Secretary has intervened. It means now that we won't be wasting money on spending it on police officers who would have to patrol this particular march. The people I really have got a lot of time for are those who take to the streets on behalf of the overthrow of this wicked, murderous, bloodthirsty regime. And I'm, really delighted that Ali Khamenei is no longer alive, quite frankly. It takes a lot to say something like this, but this is a man that has oppressed his own nation and was responsible in his last days for the murder of over 30,000 of his citizens. And people want to take to the streets to march in support of people like him. It's absolutely crazy. Absolutely bonkers. And I'm really pleased that the Home Secretary's taken some decisive action at last.
Well, exactly. You mentioned 30,000 people who dared to protest the regime who were murdered in cold blood. Of course, that figure could be higher, couldn't it, Nigel? Because we know the Iranian authorities shut down social media, shut down the internet, shut down any semblance of a free press. And of course, the figure runs to millions across the Ayatollah's 3-decade reign. The biggest sponsor of terror in the world, arguably the worst regime since the Third Reich, and yet there are people out there that would like to wave the banner. Nigel, is there a flip side to this? You are a robust conservative. Is there a free speech argument to allow people, even with wicked views, to have their say?
Yeah, there is a free speech argument, absolutely, but also there's got to be the safety of individuals on the streets of London. They need to feel free, and I'm afraid this would be a massive flash point in London should that march have taken place. You can only imagine, Mark. You would get clashes from people who hold contrary views. And I don't believe that the police would be able to keep control. So I think in this case, and it has to be exceptional, it has to be the exception to the rule. And I think the last time a march was banned was 2012. So fortunately, this isn't something that the police resort to on a regular basis. And so this is really an exceptional move by the Home Secretary.
Meanwhile, I'm getting a lot of text messages in from my viewers and listeners, Nigel, about the prices at the pumps at the moment. This from Mary, who says, good morning, Mark, and hello, Nigel. In Powys, diesel has gone up 20 pence, which is astronomical. And we've got Pete. Diesel is now £1.70 in Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, all on fuel that's already been paid for. Disgusting profiteering yet again from greedy fuel companies. Darren, hi Mark, diesel around Bristol has gone from £1.40 to £1.50, some places £1.55. Rachel Reeves is under pressure now to spare millions of drivers pain by ditching her proposed fuel duty rise. What say you? Do you think she needs to act?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's acting in two ways. One is making sure that they don't heap more taxes on petrol, and the other one is to ensure that there is not gouging or profiteering taking place in garages and forecourts throughout the United Kingdom. Now, Mary, living in Powys, is representative of many people throughout the country. She probably doesn't have a good bus service. That's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, people have to rely on their cars when they are living, particularly in rural areas. I used to represent the Ribble Valley, very rural areas. Not a great bus service into many of those villages, and people absolutely are reliant on their cars. Now, there's one other thing, Mark, which of course we pass over now and again, which is this. We are importing an immense amount of oil into the United Kingdom from Norway. They are getting some of that oil from the North Sea, where they're drilling for gas and oil. We also drill for gas and oil there, but of course this government has put a kibosh on further exploration and opening new reserves. This is bonkers. Ed Miliband needs to take action now, and they need to open the North Sea for more oil and gas. Us importing this same gas from another country is absolutely ludicrous. Could you imagine that the price would be way lower now in the United Kingdom if we were only exploring and drilling for more oil and gas? These are our reserves.
Well, Rishi Sunak, remember him, Nigel, one of his last acts as Prime Minister was to grant hundreds of potential oil licences in the North Sea, instantly reversed by Ed Miliband and this Prime Minister. What is your view of the long-term prospect of net zero? Do you think it's just a matter of when, not if, net zero is scrapped in the West? Because it just doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't. And we are competing with other countries throughout the European Union and throughout the world. And it seems to me as if we are the only country that wants to heap on more taxes on people simply to basically pay homage at the altar of net zero. They must be rubbing their hands in France and Germany and Spain and Italy while they watch Ed Miliband heaping yet more costs on industry. It means that our goods are more expensive. It's more difficult to export those goods. And every household is now paying way more. You've got the government saying that they're reducing energy bills by £150 a year. But what they're not telling you is they put them up by way more than that because of their obsession with net zero. It is about time that net zero was ditched completely. Yeah, we want to be sustainable, and we can all do things as far as sustainability is concerned, but let's get rid of this obsession with net zero.
Well, exactly. You know, 15 years ago, before the world went mad, Nigel, we all approved of renewables. It was a great idea that you've got your petrol, you've got your diesel, you've got a bit of coal, and then there are solar panels, and then there's, you know, hydropower and windmills, and it was going to be a mix. But it became ideological, didn't it? You know, no one likes dirty air, no one likes pollution, but net zero, this arbitrary target, it is an ideology, and it is really socialism with a green rosette.
Yeah. It seems to me as well, Mark, that even the Greens aren't talking about it in the way that they used to. They're talking about other things. And maybe that's why their popularity has started to increase in the opinion polls. No, this government is absolutely as obsessed with stopping oil and gas exploration. And at this particular time, when the prices are rising on the forecourt, you've just heard lots of stories about the price of petrol going up 20 pence a litre. This is huge for families who, as I say, have got no choice about the use of their cars. If they want to get about and do their Alarm Clock Britain, they get in their cars every morning at 6 o'clock and even before then to get to work.
Correct.
And it shouldn't be penalised in the way that they are. The government can do something about it, and they should.
They most definitely should. We've got Tony Marie messaging the programme. What a beautiful name that is. Good morning, Tony Marie, who says, hello, Mark. Hello, Nigel. The Shell garage in Cambridgeshire, I think Guyherne, I think it's called, has gone up to 170.9 for diesel. That is over 20 pence in a week. Well, Nigel Farage has been very busy drawing attention to this issue, and he and Robert Jenrick, who joins us at 8 a.m. live on the show this morning, have been they've received a lot of media attention. They've said that any hikes in fuel duty will be reversed under a Reform UK government. Let's take a listen.
You also pledged, or some of your candidates did, to cut council tax when they were trying to win elections at local level, and that's gone up. So how can anyone trust anything you say?
Wrong. Never once last year in the county campaign, including here in Derbyshire, did I ever say that we cut council tax.
Some of your candidates did.
No.
They haven't.
No.
They've put it up.
No. Our literature...
I'll check what the people in Kent said, because they're putting it up.
You can listen if you want to, or we can jack it in now. It's entirely up to you.
There you go, a bit of a tussle between Nigel Farage and Beth Rigby. Nigel, does it bother you that it's Reform UK who are making the headlines about fuel duty, not Kemi Badenoch?
The reality is successive Conservative governments have kept the taxation down on fuel. If you remember, do you remember the old fuel escalator? Oh my goodness me, that was awful. It used to go up every budget. And so there is a track record on behalf of the Conservatives for keeping it down. And basically, I think what Nigel Farage is doing, and I'll pay tribute to him on this, is he's pointing out how much net zero is actually costing, and he believes that of the £12 billion a year that they will save, that will be reflected in a 5 pence cut in the duty on petrol, and that is absolutely superb. So actually raising the attention about what net zero is costing every family in Britain is vitally important. And I hope Kemi will make it absolutely clear that we are on the side of the motorists. Motorists get caned time and time and time again. On their side. These are the people, as I said, Mark, who get into their car early in the morning to drive to work, work 8 hours a day, pay their taxes, and yet they're being asked to pay yet even more taxes.
Poetic common sense, as always. Fantastic to see you, Nigel. Have an excellent Wednesday. We'll catch up soon. Nigel Evans, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. Next up, a fresh diversity row as business leaders boast that in the years ahead, there will be fewer white people on their boards. When did racism become acceptable? 7:18. This is Talk Breakfast.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
$7:21. Lovely to have your company. Mark Dolan with you, in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. So much to get through. Live on the show at 8 a.m. Reform UK's Shadow Chancellor Robert Jenrick, and he'll be talking about offering some mercy to motorists because, of course, the prices at the pump have absolutely exploded. And you're messaging me with lots of detail about how much it's gone up in your area. Bridget, good morning, Mark. Here on the border of Norfolk and Suffolk, diesel has gone up by between 10p and in some garages by 20 pence a litre since last week. It is disgraceful. We'll get to more of those in just a moment. Folks, let's have a voice note on petrol prices. Here is Ben.
Morning, Mark. Yeah, price of diesel, mate. So I travel for work, do about 500 miles a week on average. On Friday evening, I drive home and main services at Spalding in Lincolnshire. The local garage was still £1.39 for diesel, has been for weeks. I then drove another 30 miles back to my house, and as I passed through Boston, there's a garage in the centre of Boston that's charging £1.69 for diesel. My friend yesterday told me that it's now at £1.75. But as a Sunday evening, there was a price difference of 30 pence a litre. It's absolutely disgusting the way that this fuel hike's risen up so much.
Disgusting indeed, Ben. It's ridiculous how much tax is in a litre of petrol. Similarly, how much tax is in a pint of beer as well. That's why when they talk about taxes, it's not just your income tax. It's not just the VAT. Every time you leave the house, you get clobbered. And I would offer special protection for drivers because I believe that people that are in cars are productive people. They're normally interacting with the economy. They are wealth creators. They're working. They're taking their kids to school. They are contributing to society. They should be supported, not attacked. And honestly, what a struggle for people as the costs go up. Another crazy story. Welcome to Mad Bonkers Britain. White males will have fewer board seats in the world of business in future, says UK Diversity Chair. Let's get reaction from broadcaster, historian and fellow at the New Culture Forum, Rafe Hadel-Mancu. Rafe, great to see you. What's the story here?
Well, essentially, there's something called the Parker Review, which is looking into how to change demographics at the top end of business in this country. And they're pointing out that in the future, there will be fewer white men in board seats because, of course, well, they haven't put it in this way, but white people are going to become a minority in the country by the 2060s. They haven't said that, but that's the logic of the argument they're saying. And yes, mathematically, it's true. There will be fewer white people on the boards if the demographic change continues at pace. But the issue here, of course, is the scale with which it's happening. Because, of course, what we're having now is a situation where the brightest and the best are being overlooked in order to meet diversity quotas. And that's extremely damaging. I mean, we have corporations now that are deliberately causing themselves self-harm in pursuit of a nonsensical ideology. And we only have to look over to the United States to see the way things should be going. Since Trump's come to power last year, for the first year since 2017, white men made up the majority of board hires because these companies aren't racist, but they're simply looking for the most talented people. And I'm afraid in this country, the talent pool of ethnic minorities who are eligible to go onto the heads of boards is far smaller. As it stands, we have around 20% of CEOs in the top FTSE 100 countries are ethnic minority people, which is about the same size of the population as a whole. But the problem is the number of ethnic minorities in this country who are low-skilled, low-wage earners is far larger than it is in the white percentage of the population. So you're trying to find CEOs from ethnic minorities from a much smaller percentage of their talent than you are from white people. So, of course, you're going to have people who aren't as qualified as they could otherwise be.
And we've seen, haven't we, in industry, a few sort of box-ticking figures getting top jobs and failing spectacularly. It turns out, Rafe, merit is not based on skin colour, it's hard work, talent and character. Who knew?
Who knew? There's something, breaking news today on talkTV. Yeah, I mean, people like Dame Sharon White, people may remember. Black woman from the civil service, parachuted into the head of John Lewis, where she then proceeded to preside over one of the most calamitous periods in John Lewis's history, employee dissatisfaction, huge hemorrhaging of profits.
No retail experience when she got the job.
No retail experience when John Lewis was ousted did they turn and replace her with the former head of Tesco. And the problem is even this board, the Parker Review Board, that's trying to bring more diversity into the top FTSE 100, even though they already have as much of a percentage as you get in the wider population. I looked at the board, 14 members of this board, only 4 are white, only 10 are ethnic minorities. Where's the balance there? And of those 10, several of them are right out of central casting, DEI heads from various organizations. So this is a slanted, biased body from the outset, and you know clearly what their conclusions are going to be.
Is it racism, this sort of policy, or is it a case of making sure that underrepresented groups, people of colour, get their opportunity? Do we need a bit of positive discrimination in order to balance things out a bit?
Well, you say positive discrimination, I say anti-white. Racism is the only racism now apparently you're allowed to be is anti-white or anti-Semitic, apparently. Look, we've had an experiment. We've had about a 30-year experiment of positive discrimination, and I wouldn't say necessarily that our economy is all that much better. As I've said before, there is racial parity in the top levels of business already. It's around 20% of top jobs filled by ethnic minorities. They're around between 18 and 19% of the wider population. But as I say, millions of people have arrived in this country in recent years who are ethnic minorities. The vast majority have been low-skilled, low-wage earners. So if only 1% of the white population, let's say, were eligible to become CEOs, amongst ethnic minorities, it would be far lower, let's just say 0.25%. So you're trying to find the very best and brightest from a much smaller talent pool amongst ethnic minorities. None of us want to bar ethnic minorities. There are good things that should be done to get rid of the socio-economic barriers that stop ethnic minorities. But what is racist is to lump all ethnic minorities together, because you're essentially saying that everyone who's non-white is exactly the same, whereas we know that Indian and Chinese people are much more likely to succeed and reach the top levels of industry. Look at the heads of Google, Alphabet, of Nvidia, of Zoom. In America, these are all Indian and Chinese. The problems are primarily with the Pakistani, Bangladeshi and black, particularly Caribbean populations, and there the issues are much more cultural. Families not pushing their children academically, single-parent families. There are a lot of issues there that are rooted in the communities from which these people come. And instead of focusing on that, there's too much focusing on vague numbers without any actually drilling down into the root causes of all of this.
Most definitely. And if you're going to play the race card, Rafe, you could draw attention to young white British boys who have the worst educational outcomes and the lowest uptake into higher education. Let's get to another story. African leaders are planning a Chagos-style slavery reparations battle with Britain. Here we go again.
Yeah, once again, now this is what happens when you have in power in Downing Street a man and a government who prioritize far-left ideology, the ideology of post-colonialism and decolonization over Britain's national interest. We've seen it with the Chagos Islands. We've seen it with our Attorney General advising the Caribbean nations on reparations. And so now our enemies around the world, those countries that are hostile to Britain, they see Keir Starmer and the Labour Party as ideological allies. We've already had the Argentinians saying, well, we never thought we could negotiate over the Falklands before. Now we think with the Labour government we could negotiate with the Falklands. So it's no surprise that African nations are now thinking, well, we can get in on this lark as well and get our 2 pennies worth. And so now they're calling for reparations, and they want to use exactly the same legal procedures that Mauritius had with the Chagos Islands to try to force Britain to abide by international law, and we know how beholden to international law Keir Starmer is, and get The Hague to issue a judgment saying to Britain, you've got to pay potentially trillions of pounds to African nations. But of course, none of this issue is really about slavery at all. This is all about people on the left wanting to attack Britain and America, and it's rooted in this deep hatred of the West. But for people for politicians in Africa, it's an avaricious cash grab, and what they're trying to do is to exploit naive Western guilt, and it's a means of diverting attention away from their own corrupt and catastrophic mismanagement of their own countries and of their institutions and of their economies. And we know, I can say all of that, because if this really was about slavery, then surely they will be focusing much more attention on the plight of modern slaves in Africa today. 7 in every 1,000 Africans today is a slave, according to the International Labour Organization. That's 10 million people. It took 300 years for the British Empire to transport 10 million people over to the new world. That would surely be the issue that you would be focusing on, because the plight of slaves today is surely a much more real issue than what happened to people 200 years ago.
While the modern woke progressive left characterise themselves, Rafe, as the good people, they're not the good people. They're actually subscribed to a wicked, stupid, mind-numbingly unintelligent worldview. They don't care about 13-year-olds in the Congo, knee-deep in mud for 14 hours a day, mining for precious minerals to make Teslas and other electric cars, driven by woke middle-class people in the West, who are the wildest hypocrites and don't care about the poor. And, the double standards are beyond, aren't they, Rafe? Listen, let's get to really bad news for the BBC. They've lost the boat race. What's the story here?
Well, this is about the fact that for the first time in its history, the BBC will not be covering the boat race between Cambridge and Oxford University, a very famous race that takes place on the Thames. It lost the TV rights a while ago, but now it's also lost the radio rights to your sister station. Times Radio has snapped that up. So well done to Times Radio for that. But 2 days ago, for the first time, the BBC did not broadcast the Commonwealth Day service from Westminster Abbey with the whole royal family there. Instead, it played an episode of Escape to the Country, as you can imagine, that regular daytime show. And we're told that they're not covering the boat race because it's elitist. We don't know why they're not covering the Commonwealth Day service. They say it's too expensive. But the core defence of the BBC has been the fact that its role is to shape national identity by covering important British national events, events that bring us together as a people, or events that are very quirky and in some way uniquely British. That's its mandate. And yet, if you look over recent years, they've lost the Grand National, they've lost the Derby, they've lost Royal Ascot, Cheltenham. Those were all pillars of the British season, and they've been abandoned by the broadcaster. We do have things still like Trooping the Colour and Wimbledon.
For now.
For how long are they going to remain? We still have the last night of the proms, but it's now unwatchable because the BBC are embarrassed by patriotism. They're embarrassed by anything that celebrates how great Britain is. And of course, it's been invaded by a sea of EU flags. There are EU lobbyists outside who hand out these things. So anyone who's patriotic now, millions of people now refuse to watch the show. And if the BBC is going to prioritise, sort of daytime slop like Escape to the Country over noteworthy, national events, then how can it claim to be our state broadcaster, our national broadcaster? Then it's going to be, the licence fee has to, of course, become indefensible.
Rafe, I love your broadcasts on the New Culture Forum. Your interviews are absorbing, wise and reflective. Rafe Hadel-Mankoo is a broadcaster, historian and fellow at the New Culture Forum, who do fantastic video and audio content, which I can most definitely recognise. Well, the BBC's loss is Times Radio's gain. Fantastic that they've got the rights to the boat race, which, in my view, is a great tradition and wonderful entertainment. So I look forward to hearing it on Times Radio when I'm not glued to talk. Here's a voice note from Danny on the shocking statistic that 1 in 4 migrants are now on universal credit.
Mark, what serious nation, what serious country would allow 170 or 200,000 people into Britain and then put them straight on universal credit and straight on benefits, free housing, free NHS. There's not a serious nation on earth that would ever do that. This Labour government will not protect British people. This Labour government will not protect British borders. Everyone's talking about war and genocide. There's a genocide going on in this country, and it's against the white native British people of these islands. We have a genocide against us. It really needs to be addressed now. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Danny. I really appreciate your voice note, and I think the timbre of what you've had to say is true. I don't know, is genocide a little strong? What I will say is that, yeah, it's okay to be racist against white people. It's insane. It should be illegal. Why it isn't? You've got business leaders boasting that there will be fewer white people in boards in the years ahead. How is that acceptable? Surely we go back to the Martin Luther King mantra of be judged by the quality of your character, not the colour of your skin. But this is just how wrong things have gone in this country. It's disgusting and it's sickening. Danny, thank you for that. This from Jason in Bristol. Good morning, Mark, says Jason. If we turned around and said we want more white people as CEOs, they would say that is racism. What is the difference? Well, of course, you're right about that. And Peter in North Somerset on energy prices and the cost at the pumps. Peter says, good morning, Mark. You're mentioning the rising cost of fuel at the pumps. However, no one is mentioning heating oil. 2 weeks ago, we as a small rural community bulk bought an order for 1,500 litres. The cost was £939. If we want to order the same amount this morning, the cost is 2,000 quid. What about that for a price increase? Well, that is 100%, and it is a scandal. Really, really shocking stuff. Next up, finally, HMS Dragon has set sail. But is the Iran war a tale of Britain's national decline? I'll be asking a top rear admiral next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Brian has messaged the show. Good morning, Brian. He says, Mark, we should challenge Sir Keir Starmer in the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. Free speech is the fundamental right of an individual to express an opinion without interference from a government. Starmer is a disgrace. Joanna in Salisbury. Hi, Mark. OMG. Prioritise Stop the Breakfast Club. Oh, priorities. Stop the breakfast clubs and feed our military. The parents should feed their own children. That's news that more kids are going to get free school meals. Is it the job of the state to feed our kids? I'll be asking Anne Widdicombe very shortly indeed. Stephen Sheffield. Hi, Mark. As part of Alarm Clock Britain, this diesel increase will cost me an additional £1.60 a month. I will now need to work out what I can't afford to do. I think it's more than £1.60. I think that's a typo. And I think whatever it is, it's going to be too much. Thank you for that, Stephen. I wish you well. Everyone is struggling at the moment, are they not? Except the establishment and those who rule over us. Big news, a developing story. HMS Dragon finally sets sail for the Mediterranean, the Royal Naval destroyer. left Portsmouth yesterday, a week after its deployment was first announced by Sir Keir Starmer. It's expected to take 5 to 7 days to reach Cyprus. But is the war in Iran an example of Britain's national decline? Who better to ask than a former Royal Navy officer, Rear Admiral Matthew Parr. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mark.
Lovely to have you on the programme. First, on behalf of my viewers and listeners, can I thank you for your service to this country? It's an unedifying sight, isn't it, Britain's war contribution so far?
Yeah, it doesn't look good. I think the frustration I know people in the Navy will be having is that they've actually pulled out all the stops. This ship was in dry dock 8 days ago and not expected to go to sea for 4 weeks or more. And to get it out the door today, or last night, in fact, is a big achievement on a lot of people's behalf.
Yes, because it should have taken 6 weeks and it took 6 days, right?
Yeah, but what will be frustrating them is clearly it's a decision that could have been made some time ago, and avoid the embarrassment. And also, let's be clear, the decision not to go and then to go has been made by politicians, not by the Navy.
Yeah, well, this is exactly right. Now, we can't just blame this Labour government, can we, for the hollowing out of our military, but things certainly haven't got better in this current administration.
No, I mean, I joined the Navy in the early 80s, and I suppose looking back on it, you know, my 34 plus years of service was characterised by a long decline in many ways. And if you look, the reason that Dragon hasn't been able to sail, or we haven't got another ship there, is the class of ship that Dragon belongs to. There are 6 of them. They replaced a class of 12. And originally, when it was decided that we were going to replace them, we were going to have 12 ships to replace them. And then in 2003, the Blair government cut that to 8. And then in, I think, 2008, the Brown government cut it down further to 6. So the reason there aren't many ships available is a result of decisions taken by both governments over many years. And I find it a bit rich, frankly, to hear politicians, Blair included, saying we should be doing more when they've presided over the decisions over many years from both parties that have ended up with us having so few options now.
You get the governments you deserve, though, don't we? We live in a democracy, Rear Admiral. Do you think that the public share some of the blame for not appreciating the importance of our military, that we've chosen NHS spending and welfare over our secure territorial boundaries?
I think so. And also, I mean, don't forget, it looked at the time like a very reasonable decision, and perhaps it was. I think the statistic I heard recently was that as little as 25 years ago, we spent about the same on the NHS and defence.
Wow.
And here we are 25 years later with the NHS about 4 times.
Correct.
Now, in many respects, you can understand why a liberal democracy would want to have that as its aim. But I think where we are now is recognising that actually we've been pushing our luck for many years going down that route, and we need to do something different. And if there's anything that's good that comes out of this episode, I hope it's a waking up not only on the part of politicians, but also on the part of the public, that we've been spending too little on defence for too long, and we've been carrying too much risk by doing so.
And Rear Admiral, given that Iran are the biggest sponsor of terrorism globally, given that they haven't just murdered 30 to 40,000 people in recent months for protesting the regime, the figure runs to millions across the 3-decade reign of the Ayatollah. It's clearly a wicked regime. Does this make America and Israel's actions a worthy war? Is it a noble war?
I think for much of my career started with worrying very much about the Russians and probably ended worrying about the Russians. And in between all those years, we spent a lot of time training and practicing for pretty much what's happening now, which was a major conflict involving Iran in the Gulf, and indeed committed a lot of our resources, not just in the Navy, but the Air Force particularly too, to the Middle East. And it was mostly worrying about what would happen in the Gulf involving Iran. So Iran has been a thorn in the side of the West for decades. And I suppose looking back historically, you would say that something like this was bound to happen at some stage. So it's a particularly galling that when it has finally happened, we haven't looked as ready for it as we should have been.
A privilege to have you on the show. I do hope you'll join me again in the near future, Matthew. My thanks to former Royal Navy officer Rear Admiral Matthew Parr. So many of you are struggling with the cost of petrol and diesel at the pumps. This from an unnamed texter. Good morning, Mark. Shell on a £143, gone from I'm not great with these numbers. Carol Vorderman, I'm not. Basically, it's gone from 143 to 144 to 168. All their stations are going up like a rocket. Meanwhile, Esso's gone from 144 to 146. So Shell there not covering themselves in glory. I'll get to more of your texts in a moment. Here's a voice note from Graham on fuel prices.
Morning, Mark. Great show. I'm a little bit behind. I'm watching on YouTube. You just mentioned about fuel prices. You mentioned petrol going up by, I don't know, 8p a litre. Well, in Northern Ireland at the weekend, actually during last week, there was quite a few stations put the price of diesel up by 17p in one go. Stations that are selling diesel at 165, and I've just seen a photo that someone's posted on social media of a petrol station in Belfast. Diesel is now £2.5 a litre. I kid you not.
It's disgusting, and people who are in cars already are overtaxed because you've got your road tax, you've got the tax in your petrol, your diesel, you've got to fix your car. You know, the whole thing is a nightmare, and maybe you've been encouraged to buy electric as well. This war on motorists has got to end. Well, we're joined by the Shadow Chancellor on behalf of Reform UK, Robert Jenrick, live at 8 o'clock. Let's mop up a couple of other text messages before we get to the break. Jenny says, good morning, Mark. Remember, Labour promised to defend British values and hard-won rights. Yesterday, they voted to remove the right to trial by jury, but this will do nothing to fix the backlog, as the same judges in the same courtrooms are taking the same time. That's what's going to happen. The removal of juries is going to do nothing other than politicise justice. And Graham with a great text in Stirling. Good morning, Mark. We're told that digital ID will improve access to services. Great. What services? It's a brilliant, brilliant point. Keep those messages coming. So much more to get through. More pain at the pumps next. This is 7:48 Talk Breakfast.
We genuinely are on resignation watch. There is absolutely no doubt about it. Labour MPs, they say, listen, Keir, your position is untenable. This is all about appointing that rat, Peter Mandelson, who faces a criminal investigation.
Can Keir Starmer survive the Mandelson scandal? We have breaking news for you. We've just been talking about, of course, Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff. We've now had another resignation from Number 10. And Keir Starmer's Director of Communications, Tim Allen, has now also resigned. The plot is thickening. The noose is tightening.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
"7:51 Talk Breakfast." Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. The brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer live at 10. Jeremy Kyle back tomorrow, and it's been lovely to have your company, all your calls, text messages. Robert Jenrick live on the show at 8 a.m. on fuel prices. So many messages coming in regard to that. We'll get to them in a moment. Michael picking up on our military story. Good morning, Mark. We have more admirals than ships. Why? What do they do? Well, this is the establishment disease, isn't it? Middle management. What about this from? Let's have a look. We've got so many messages. Where to possibly begin? Good morning, Mark, says Sharon in Staffordshire. Why are we having all of these protests in our country? British people will never be allowed to protest in their country. So why are they allowed to in ours? Sharon, you make a lot of sense. That's in relation to the Home Secretary's decision to support a Met Police request to ban pro-Iranian marches this weekend. But we've got more fish to fry this morning because the UK will have the 8th highest duty on petrol compared to EU member states without a government U-turn, and the 2nd highest duty on diesel. Well, breaking that story were the Taxpayers Alliance. Their media campaign manager is William Yarwood, who's in the studio. Hello, William.
Morning, Mark. Thanks for having me on the show. Pleasure.
So it's great to have you. And what a shocking headline. So what's the story here?
So basically, we're arguing that if Rachel Reeves does not U-turn on the September hike in fuel duty, Brits are going to be paying at the pumps the 8th highest, like you said earlier, 8th highest petrol duty compared to EU member states. And even worse, Mark, the 2nd highest fuel duty on diesel compared to EU member states. And of course, this is all coming as the Iranian wars going on. You know, oil prices are spiking. There's lots of uncertainty around people's ability to fill up their cars. And this is going to hit ordinary taxpayers. You know, mums taking their kids to school, you know, people going to the supermarket, small businesses who rely on, you know, cars to get around and do their business. So this is actually a really important issue. And I know, you know, we joke about Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer U-turning all the time, but I think this is one clear example where a U-turn could be beneficial, not just to British people, but to their pockets as well.
Most definitely. And look, I value all British citizens, but we need to love bomb drivers, don't we? Because people with cars are normally productive citizens who are contributing to the economy. You've got, you know, folk in vans delivering their goods. You've got tradespeople, but also families taking their kids to school. If you've got a car, you're making a contribution and you shouldn't be clobbered.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also an argument that actually some people can't afford not to have cars, right? They need them.
It's not a choice.
It's not a choice
for many millions of people.
And it's not a luxury either, Mark. I mean,
but the left think it is.
Absolutely. And you've seen this not just in London, but in places like Cardiff as well. I'm not sure if you know, but Cardiff City Council are installing a new parking supercharge.
Brilliant.
A new parking supercharge on people physically having bigger vehicles, which hilariously, Mark, also affects EVs, also affects electric vehicles.
Ironic.
Yeah, which is absolutely hilarious. So, you know, there's a very large, I think, anti-motorist, anti-car sentiment, not just in the capital city, but more widely across the country. And I think that if Reeves wants to show some motorists some love and show them that actually this government's on their side, they need to reverse this fuel duty hike because it's going to be an absolute pain for people at the pumps in a few months' time. I mean, you're already seeing prices go up now. I was walking on the way in here and I talked to one or two people and they'd already mentioned that they've seen their, you know, petrol go up at the pumps, and it's going to cause a huge, huge issue if Reeves doesn't deal with this. And I'm glad that you have the Conservatives, Reform, and indeed the Liberal Democrats now, and now us at the Taxpayers Alliance, all calling for the same thing.
Most definitely. And it's bad for the economy to clobber drivers. Can you explain why?
Sure, it's bad for the economy to clobber drivers, basically because, like you said earlier, drivers are actually very, very productive people, because people with small businesses often rely on cars to get to and from places, especially if they have like shipping businesses, if they're, you know, tradespeople, if they're carpenters, plumbers, electricians, you know, the works. You know, well, you can't put all those in the back of a little mini car. You need a large car, you need a van, you need something big enough to get you around the place. And also, you know, when it comes to just ordinary folk, I mean, people don't live in cities which don't have amazing public connections, right? You know, not everybody lives in London. People live, you know, outside of London. They commute in via car. People live in other cities which don't have the same kind of metro links like Leeds, like we do. So actually, the car is an engine of economic productivity and growth. And I think the way motorists have been treated in this country, not just in our capital city, but across the country over the last decade or so, is going to be completely atrocious.
Well, do you remember how the government thought that farmers were all rich landowners with, you know, 80 grand Range Rovers and Barber Wellington boots and all the rest of it? Or is it Hunters? Is it the Hunter Welly? That's the posh one, right? So the sort of metropolitan liberals, you know, that's how they view farmers, which of course they're not. What they are actually is struggling with 14-hour days on the minimum wage in all weathers.
Yes, exactly.
That's the reality. Similarly, car drivers are seen as this somewhat of an elite, and they're not. There are many poor people with cars who are struggling. Let me give you this text from Steve, not calling Steve poor. What Steve's got to do, though, he's got to make the numbers add up for his budget, right? I'm sure Steve is doing well, but it's not easy. No. Steve in Sheffield says, as part of Alarm Clock Britain, this diesel increase will cost me an additional £160 per month. I will need, says Steve, I will need to work out what I can't afford to do.
Isn't it depressing that, first of all, Steve, this is why we at the Taxpayers Alliance are fully on your side. I think that the government should reverse on this fuel duty hike and make sure that you're not paying that extra money per month, because it's people like him, Mark, who basically get the country going, right? It's people like him who keep the country ticking along. And motorists are part of Alarm Clock Britain, right? They're objectively part of that Alarm Clock Britain, which is what I support as well. And I think that this government needs to recognise that before they allow this hike to come in September and do damage to ordinary people like Steve who've done nothing wrong and actually don't deserve to have to make these budgetary choices that they never needed to in the first place.
I think it's economically illiterate.
Yes.
The great tragedy for this Labour government is they need growth, because then they can do what Labour government's there to do, which is invest in public services and look after poor people. So I try to wake my lefty friends up and go, you're left-wing, you should support the Taxpayers Alliance in a low-tax economy, because then there'll be more national income, and then you give it to poor people, and you can be super left-wing with all of this national income. And you and I have got no objection to an administration giving money to poor folk if we've got it through national income. What you can't have it through is tax. And by the way, and we always talk about this when we're on the show, the politicians don't realise that inflation is the ultimate tax.
Yes, absolutely. The stealth tax.
It's the hidden tax. It's the carbon monoxide of taxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it hurts everyone, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. The stealth tax, I mean, people see it in their food prices, people see it in their energy bills, people see it why, you know, their wages go up, and yet they seem to not have more cash left over because more things are more expensive. It's an absolutely dangerous thing to do, and, you know, any government, any responsible government keeps inflation down by making sure that there's not too much money in the money supply and they don't spend too much money as well.
And William's stressed out because he's going to drive out of here in his Lambo. And let me tell you, it costs a fortune. William Yarwood, Taxpayers Alliance, come back soon.
Always
Robert Jenrick live on the show in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defence of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. Those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 3 minutes past 8, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Let's go live now to the Reform UK Shadow Chancellor Robert Jenrick on the Chancellor's plans to scrap the reduction on fuel duty. Don't forget that it was mentioned in her autumn budget that she was scrapping the 5p a litre fuel duty relief introduced by the Tories in 2022. But does she need to keep it in place in order to help drivers who are struggling with the cost of living? Robert Jenrick, welcome to Talk Breakfast.
Good morning.
You and your boss Nigel Farage made quite the splash at a forecourt of your own where you'd effectively subsidised one particular petrol station. What do you think the policy needs to be?
Well, look, I think people are really struggling right now. They were before the war in Iran. They will be afterwards. This is the worst possible moment to be increasing people's taxes when they fill up at the pump. I've been talking to mums who are struggling to take their kids to school in rural areas because of the cost of fuel, white van men and women, tradesmen who are out there all day in their vans. I even heard somebody on the radio, would you believe it, who was thinking of delaying their chemotherapy treatment because they were worried about the cost of driving all the way to hospital. People have had enough. We've got to take action and lighten the load. So what we are doing is calling for Rachel Reeves to cancel this increase in fuel duty that's coming down the line. It may not seem like a lot of money, but it's going to make a bit of difference to people right now, and they need that help. And we've said that if she doesn't do it, then a reform government will do it for her in its first budget and make life just a little bit easier for people, bring down people's bills at a time where people are suffering out there in the country.
Because for many millions of people, Robert Jenrick, driving the car is not a choice. They rely on it. They have to.
Yeah, and look, there's a view of some politicians, particularly in the Labour Party and on the left, that people can use public transport to get to work, to hospital, to college. Well, millions and millions of people in the country do not have that luxury. You know, so many people in places like I represent in Nottinghamshire drive to work, or maybe they share a car with their colleagues, and that is the only way they can get to the office or the factory in the morning. And those people need a bit of relief at the moment because they're finding life so difficult with food prices going up, energy bills going up, and now this massive increase when everyone goes to fill up at the petrol pumps. And so I am hoping that Nigel and I can put pressure on Rachel Reeves for this to be the, whatever it is, 18th, 19th, 20th U-turn that she's done. Listen to how people are suffering in the country and take action.
Robert Jenrick, justice was your previous brief when you were with the Conservatives a few moons ago. Your reaction to the scrapping of jury trials for some of the supposedly less serious offences?
Yeah, this is a real shame. This is something that's existed in our country for at least 800 years. It's been one of the cornerstones of our democracy and our criminal justice system. And that used to be something that David Lammy, the Justice Secretary, and the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, themselves agreed with. They campaigned during COVID to protect jury trials when even as the country was locked down the government at the time, with the support of the Labour Party, chose not to scrap jury trials, in fact to bring them back pretty quickly with the right safeguards alongside them. And yet now they're being removed, ostensibly to bring this backlog in cases down in the courts. But there are better ways in which that can be done, like getting the court sitting round the clock, because pretty much every day 10 to 20% of all the courtrooms in the country are sitting empty, despite the fact that the senior people in the judiciary are offering to staff them up with judges and clerks and so on.
Yeah.
And you have to think that this is actually an ideological view today, not one that's based on real concern about the backlog. It's that people like Keir Starmer don't trust the public.
Right, I was going to say,
they don't trust the public.
Is it an assault on people power? Is this the protection of the establishment and the politicisation of our judiciary almost?
Yeah, I think it's that people like the Prime Minister do not trust ordinary people to make these decisions. And that, at the end of the day, is the beauty of the jury system. It's 12 ordinary people coming together, pooling their collective wisdom and experience of the world to make a very important decision, the most important decision, whether their fellow citizens are guilty or innocent, and should have life-changing decision made about them. And you see this in other things, on the assault on freedom of speech, ID cards, so many different fronts. You see this government taking action against our basic core liberties and not trusting the people.
And neither the axing of jury trials or digital ID were in the Labour manifesto, so they have no moral or political weight.
No, exactly. And that's why I don't think they're going to happen. You know, I think with jury trials, there's a lot of opposition in Parliament, including some Labour MPs. There's lots of opposition in the House of Lords, again, including people across the political spectrum. And I think it's going to founder, and quite rightly so. You know, it's very rare for an issue to unite Nigel Farage and me and Diane Abbott and Jeremy Corbyn. But you've got people at all political persuasions coming together to say, absolutely not. We've got to protect this. And there is a precedent, because Tony Blair, of course, tried to do this himself not 20 years ago or so. And once again, MPs of all political persuasions came together and blocked him. And I hope the same happens here. On ID cards, who knows if this will happen? I suspect billions of pounds will be wasted pursuing this pointless project, and then they'll probably never happen. And that's money that should be being spent to bring people's bills down, cut their taxes at this moment where everybody's under so much pressure.
The Home Secretary has yielded to a request from the Met Police to ban pro-Iranian regime marches in London this weekend. An outbreak of common sense, Robert.
Yeah, well, look, all credit where it's due. It's absolutely the right decision. I don't want to see people celebrating Islamist extremism on the streets of London or in fact any one of our cities. And it was discussing the other day where I think in Birmingham there was a sort of celebration of the life of the Ayatollah. And remember, you know, this might seem like a distant conflict, and in many respects it is, but that man supplied IEDs and weapons that were used in Iraq and Afghanistan to kill British troops. So brave men died at the behest of that man, and their families will be watching on and seeing people lauding him, celebrating him as if he was some kind of hero. I never want to see that on the streets of our country. It is a sad reflection of how broken some parts of our country are today, that those attitudes are allowed to be out there in plain sight on our streets, and I don't want to see it in London. So I'm very pleased that this event has been called off.
Robert, you and Nigel Farage co-opted a petrol station yesterday. Nigel went for the old school barber jacket. You went for a rather modern, sleek puffer jacket. How are you settling into the Reform UK project, notwithstanding your outerwear?
Well, I do have a barber, but I decided to go for my my puffer jacket.
Man
instead.
of the people, keeping it real.
Well, absolutely. Look, I'm really enjoying it, and it's a lot of fun. More fun than the Tories, but more importantly, it's such energy and momentum behind it, and we just want to use every day to take our message out there. And yesterday we're out in Derbyshire, as you say, commandeering a petrol station, reducing the price, putting pressure on Rachel Reeves to do the same across the whole country. I want Reform to be the party for working people, and working people are finding life very tough at the moment, and so we've got to be their trade union, putting pressure on the government to take action to make their lives a little bit better.
Now, Robert, before I let you go, I know you're on a tight media round this morning. Great to have you on the show. you've rightly said that scrapping the two-child benefit cap is unaffordable at the moment. I think that's very responsible, economically prudent, and many of my viewers and listeners would wholeheartedly agree. Unfortunately, your boss, Nigel Farage, doesn't agree, because after that particular press conference, he said he'd love to scrap the two-child benefit cap, but the Tory press won't let him. So when are what Nigel thinks and the rest of the party think going to dovetail?
Well, look, I think his view, and I agree with him, is that we want British people to be able to have more kids. And at the moment, it's tough because people can't afford to. They're worried about the cost of childcare, cost of housing, cost of living with the food prices going up and wages stagnating. But unfortunately, Rachel Reeves is leaving us with public finances shot to pieces as a result of all the waste and talking down the economy and the taxes that she's increased, which have meant everyone's being made redundant and growth is stagnating. And so at the moment, we just don't have the money to do this, and it wouldn't be responsible. Look, in the future, we'll have to see. What we do want to do is find ways to help British people to have kids and have a good life. The way to do that, though, is not through more welfare. It's through getting good jobs back, bringing people's bills down and getting some economic growth going again in the country.
Outstanding to have you on the show. We'll catch up soon. My thanks to Reform Shadow Chancellor Robert Jenrick. Your reaction, 03444991000. Well, Reform UK would reinstate this cut to fuel duty, 5p a litre. Karen is in County Derry. Good morning, Karen.
Good morning.
Top of the morning. How's your Wednesday going?
It's sunny, which is an odd thing.
Sunny in Derry, I know. Well, I've heard it's very, very sunny up in the northeast as well. But I tell you something, that's a grey cloud over everyone is the cost of petrol and diesel, right?
Definitely.
So tell me about oil heating, because this is another scandal, very underreported.
Well, I lived in Manchester for years, so I'd never seen oil heating until I moved here 13 years ago.
Yeah.
And the price of oil heating is extortionate anyway, but it's risen by about 70% in 7 days. And the oil that they're selling now isn't the oil that came down due to the war. This is stuff they'd had before then. I'll give you an example, right? At the end of February, it was £202 for 300 litres of oil. And now it's over 347.
Well, it's an absolute scandal. And it's my understanding, Karen, that some people are being burgled now and having their oil stolen by criminals.
That's standard. That's been going on since I moved here. You have to literally padlock, chain up your oil tank.
What is the country coming to? Karen, can you tell me about the impact on your life and your livelihood by the rising cost of oil to heat your home?
Well, I can't afford to put oil in I can't afford even to put 100 litres in because I'm disabled. My daughter's husband works, so they don't get benefits. She's had to go out and buy halogen heaters to heat the rooms for her children. We have electric fire in the living room. But do you know there's still people here with coal? That's how bad it is here.
Karen, this is devastating in 21st century modern Britain. Yeah. And also worth pointing out, Karen, that the cost of electric heaters is astronomical. So that is not a solution, is it?
It's not a solution, but it's cheaper than oil.
Yeah. And oil used to be the cheaper option, didn't it, over electric?
It did, definitely, but not anymore. I mean, literally, it goes up each day. The price goes up again and again and again. So on principle alone, I don't think I'll go to oil again. I'll just buy some halogen heaters.
And Karen, I mean, if you're cold, that affects your quality of life, affects your ability to do things, and of course, it could be bad for your health as well.
Well, that's it. I've been in the hospital twice. This year's February, and I just came out last week with a blood infection, which was nearly a pneumonia.
It's absolutely shocking. How are you feeling now, Karen? Are you back on your feet?
I'm okay. Just tired, but I'm okay.
Darling,
the sun's shining, you have to smile.
We wish you well. Karen, it's not fair and it's not right what you're going through. You should have that support and you shouldn't be paying through the nose for oil, all as a result of government policies, not just Labour, but the previous Tories as well. Karen, stay in touch with us. Let us know how you're getting on. Karen there, having to buy halogen heaters just to keep the house warm. She's disabled. She's had health challenges. It's just not right, is it? 8:16, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. More to come.
current affairs, international news, letting criminals off while sending... Oi! Oi! You shut up! I'm trying to record something.
Stand by for 3 powerhouse hours of breaking news, challenging views. I don't give a flying damn about international law. I think people will viscerally reject this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.19, you're listening to Talk Breakfast. Let's head to Westminster and let's catch up with the Conservative Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, Mel Stride, good friend of the show. Good morning, Mel.
Good morning.
Great to have you back on the programme. So much to get through this morning. So it was the Conservatives that introduced fuel relief at 5p a litre. That was in 2022. I think we both agree that it needs to be retained and not scrapped, which is the Chancellor's plan. But is it affordable to retain this relief?
Yes, I mean it is if you run the economy in an appropriate way, by which I mean, for example, getting on top of the benefits bill, getting people off benefits and into work. We have costed initial savings already of £23 billion on that measure alone. And look, in terms of keeping these fuel duty rates low, we for 15 years actually froze fuel duty, and on 2 occasions, including that 5p cut that you've referred to, we actually reduced it. And there's probably no more important time to be doing that than at the moment, obviously, with petrol prices beginning to rise at the pumps because of what's going on in the Middle East.
Mel, behind you is a prize numpty called Steve Bray, who is a anti-Brexit campaigner. And I think this is an opportunity for you to actually demonstrate an outstanding Conservative Party legacy, which is our departure from the European Union. Perhaps you'd like to tell Steve Bray that since we left the European Union, we've had higher economic growth than Germany, we've had more investment than the rest of Europe, and that we've saved about £20 billion a year for the privilege of membership of a dying economic bloc. Brexit, a positive Conservative legacy?
Well, look, we've had the Brexit vote. We took our decision. We've embraced it. We are running with what must be now a new rewired economy, and that is going to mean getting on top of public spending, particularly the welfare bill, getting taxes down, particularly those taxes that lean into economic growth and job creation. And we've got a lot of work to do also around supply side things like building roads and rail and reservoirs, housing, getting our energy costs down. And that is all the work that the Conservative Party is deeply invested in now, doing the serious thinking around the economy, unlike some of the other political parties that are just coming up with sound bites and quick and apparently easy fixes.
Most definitely. Well, look, I'm all for Steve Bray protesting because that's the great country that we live in, Mel. It's unfortunate for him that a Remainer like myself is now happy that we're out. But can we get to the Home Secretary's decision to ban pro-Iranian regime marches this weekend? Is it the right move?
Yes, it is. She's taken the right decision here. It's obviously on the advice of the Metropolitan Police, who have concluded, no doubt based on various intelligence, that there is a significant risk here of some kind of civil disorder if the march were to go ahead. And so I think they've absolutely taken the right decision, so we would support her on that.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. What about jury trials? They've worked well for 800 years, and why are so many of them going to be curtailed now? What do you make of this move?
Well, this is completely the wrong decision. You know, if you're potentially up for a charge that could lead to a conviction of up to 3 years in prison, you are now going to be losing your right to a jury charge and a jury trial, and actually appearing before a magistrate and a judge instead. And I think that's entirely the wrong approach. It's undermining one of our fundamental freedoms. There are better and more appropriate ways of getting the backlog in the court system down, which this government is ducking, including more effectively using the court availability they have at the moment, where I think yesterday 10% of it was sitting there completely unused. Those are the things they need to get on top of, not curtailing what are some pretty ancient rights and fundamental, actually, to our sense of confidence in our judicial system.
A few other very positive aspects of the Conservative time in office, including Mel Stride. In July of 2024, when the country went to the polls, we had the highest growth in the G7, I think. Certainly at the start of the year we did. And historically low unemployment and inflation at the target rate of 2%. There were many positives. There is a negative headline, though, in today's Mail newspaper. 1 in 4 migrants claim universal credit. Do the Conservatives need to admit their mistakes on immigration whilst in office?
Well, I think net migration undoubtedly rose far too high at the end of the last Conservative government. I think we peaked out at about 900,000 almost, which, when you think that back in the day David Cameron was talking about us getting it down to the tens of thousands, clearly that was completely unacceptable. I think, to be fair, the Sunak government, James Cleverly, as Home Secretary, did bring in changes to visa arrangements that actually have subsequently seen those numbers decline quite dramatically.
Massively.
Actually. I think we've probably halved that number now. But having said that, if your question is, should we put our hands up and say that net migration was way too high, then I'm afraid, yes, it was.
Mel, we know about what's happening in the Middle East. Are you worried for the stability of the British economy?
Yes, I am, because we're in a very brittle state. We're in a brittle state because this government has taken the wrong choices on the economy. They've whacked up taxes, particularly on jobs. They borrowed a lot of money, spent a lot of money. All those things have stoked inflation in particular. We had the highest inflation in the G7 last year. The IMF says we'll have the highest inflation in the G7 this year. And what's happening in the Middle East, of course, is going to be stoking inflation. And that is going to make us all poorer. And we've seen where we get these external shocks in the past, that if you have a reasonably strong economy, you can do things to intervene, such as furlough when we had COVID, and cost of living support when we had the high inflation around the Ukraine war. But you can't do those things if you have a weak economy that's already pushed hard up against the buffers. And I'm afraid that's the economy that Rachel Reeves has created.
What are your thoughts about the future for your party, Mel? I've talked about very strong aspects of Tory legacy, because I think that when people attack the Conservatives over 14 years, they forget the pandemic and they forget the war in Ukraine, which were seismic events which impacted both the economy and society. So I'd like it on record that you judged the Conservatives in that context, and in that context, not too bad. But what about the future? If you look at the polls, it's all about reform. What is your great hope? Do you see yourselves as the grown-up partners in a reform-led coalition?
No, we're not talking about coalition.
That would be good, wouldn't it? That would be the best of both worlds.
Well,
Nigel's vision and your competency.
Well, look, competency at the end of the day feeds into the best leadership for our country. And if what we're saying here is that Reform don't have competency, then why would we want to get into bed with them as a partner, and why would the country want them?
Because they're going to win.
Of Britain. Well, no, I don't think so, because, I mean, if you look at the polls, if we're going to talk polls, you've actually seen Reform's vote softening fairly significantly, actually, in recent times. The election, of course, is over 3 years away. Everything could happen in that time. What we're concentrating on is firstly, well, holding the government to account. So in Parliament today, We will be voting against and holding the government to account on the retirement tax. This is pensioners being dragged into paying income tax for the first time. There'll be 1 million of those. We're also on the fuel duty increase. It is the Conservatives in Parliament, not Reform or any other party, that has prayed against the statutory instrument that will bring that into effect. So we are leading the charge on that issue. But more broadly than that, what we've got to do and will continue to do is to set out a serious, properly funded plan to revive and radically rewire our economy, and that is a big piece of work. We do it with great seriousness, and we're out there talking about it at various points, and that is cutting through. And getting back to the polls, if you look at the polls, the one area in which the Conservative Party is ahead of every other party, it is on the economy.
Mel Stride, we love having you on the show. Thank you for your valuable time. We'll catch up soon. Mel Stride is the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Interesting, that Tory legacy. For me, the two big, huge mistakes of their 14 years in power: immigration and net zero. OK? Apart from that, you got a pandemic and you got the invasion of Ukraine. Basically, Liz Truss had to write a cheque to pay our energy bills. It was around £50 billion. The pandemic, £500 billion plus. So aside from that, I think net zero and immigration. But let me know your thoughts. If I've missed any aspects of the Conservative legacy, then do let me know. With me in the studio now, Talk's lead breakfast reporter, Samara Gill. Good morning, Samara.
Good morning. I didn't know there were others that I had to compete with. But, you know, in this industry, I mean...
Well, Damien's, he's got ambitions.
Damien's an ambitious fellow. No, I think you've done the impossible, Mark. Can I just point out, you've put fuchsia pink and burgundy red together, and you've actually made it work.
Well, I'm always encouraging people to watch the show on YouTube by searching Talk and Up We Pop. But I will say, I think our radio listeners are lucky today because they don't have to see this rather dire combination.
I love it.
Can I say I got dressed in the dark? I look like someone whose wife left him 3 weeks ago.
No, come on.
Don't know where the iron is.
No, you're too self-deprecating, Mark. I think you do a good job of pulling it off.
You're very kind. I'll take all of that. Samara, massive news. The Home Secretary has yielded to a request from the Met Police to ban pro-Iranian regime marches over the weekend in the capital. What's the story?
Well, the story on that is that she's basically, Shabana Mahmood has put the foot down, but they are, you know, in a weird way, this is a weird counter-argument, but I thought those marches were actually quite good. And they were good in the respect that the intelligence services could then take down whoever was at those marches and put them on a list. And I know for a fact, I've read articles that, you know, MI5, MI6 were working together to use those in order to find out who those sleeper cells were and who was embedded within the community. Because we know that Iran has been putting sleeper cells into the United Kingdom for years, a lot of them via the small boat crisis. And interestingly, Shabana Mahmood just hasn't come up with something in regards to the asylum crisis that will ensue over what is happening in Iran right now. I went out to the embassy a couple days ago and I had a chat to an Iranian asylum seeker. Now, they're some of our highest when it comes to who's actually applying to come here. It's around 8,000 last year that came. And I think it begs a really morally dubious question. Do we take them in? Yes, they are fleeing from a genuinely war-torn, horrible place. But also, is this the type of person we want in the country? Someone who's seen a lot, someone who has experienced a lot of trauma. Let's just have a look at the asylum seeker that I did chat to outside the embassy. Can you just talk about why you decided to leave?
میگه ما میدونیم که تو پناهنده هستی. دلیلش چی بوده که کشور رو ول کردی اومدی اینجا؟
من با زمانی که در ایران سیاسی منه شروع شده.
He said when I was in Iran I didn't have no security and I had an issue with the Revolutionary Guard. That's why I have to get away and to make myself free of all this trouble.
Yeah, that was and you didn't want to do that, but you decided to pay the people smuggler, get across the border. This is what, because of how horrible Iran was.
Yeah. And ایران شرایطش ببین بکنیم هر مکان عمومی شما سرکوب میشید داخل ایران.
He says since you born in Iran, from school you've been suppressed and until you grow up. Each stage of the your life you don't have no freedom and there is no right for anyone in there in Iran.
ما اومدیم اینجا ما مهمان کشورش.
He says we are a guest in your country and when as long as Iran get free we immediately go back to our country. He loves his country and he wants to stay here. Even me. Even I'm not a refugee, I love to go back to Iran. We thought we are in trouble, but look at this country. They're taking over everything here. And the English are the second citizen in this country. Not anymore look like it's their country, even they're afraid to put their own flag up.
Now, that was a jaw-dropping moment at the end. This young man who is seeking asylum in the UK, an Iranian who is no friend of the regime.
No.
At least that's his position. Now, there was a lady there translating for him. Who was she? Because what she said at the end was amazing. But who was she?
Yeah, and there's a longer form video that's going to go out on YouTube about that. But she was an Iranian national. She seemed like quite a wealthy woman. She was living in Holland Park in Kensington, as she told me. And she came here about 20 years ago to escape the regime. Not an asylum seeker.
She lives in the UK.
Yeah, not an asylum seeker. Raised her kids here. She said the standard for education is worse in England than it was when she was living in Iran. And she was she spoke very painfully about what happened and what has happened to our country. I sometimes think we discount the experience of some of these immigrants that came over 20 years ago who have seen the changing face of Britain. You know, she came over here when we were taking in, 5,000 to 10,000 immigrants per year, which is not mass migration by any extent. And I think she had some really powerful things to say, but she also said she'd return back to Iran if they were under a peaceful regime, and so did that asylum seeker. And I think that's what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to create an environment in which people want to stay in the country that they live in. And unfortunately, people like Keir Starmer, Shabana Mahmood, they want to keep these hostile regimes going for some reason, and we have to keep the inflow of Iranians.
Well, that lady, right, that she was speaking, now when she started to, I thought she'd be a bit woke.
Yeah,
and
she was not.
Towards the end of her remarks, she was speaking for herself, not translating this guy. She said that essentially Islamic extremists are taking over the UK.
Yes.
And she said that British people are second-class citizens in their own country. It takes a foreigner to show us what we're doing to ourselves.
It's outrageous, and I want to throw to a clip. This is a great segue, Mark. Thank you.
I try.
For Keir Starmer, because the hatred that they've got for Keir Starmer is palpable, because they understand what it's like to live under Iranian terror, Muslim extremism, and they are absolutely enraged with how Keir Starmer hasn't prescribed the IRGC as a terrorist organisation, hasn't kicked the ambassador out. You know, the embassy there is still operating. I saw people come in and out. Let's just have a quick look at what they had to say about Keir Starmer. Sorry, just quickly, would you just tell us how you feel about Keir Starmer? He's not been very supportive of you guys.
Yeah, he's not. I'm afraid he's not. While he has to, because we are living in his country and we have the right to get his support, to get his voice. But he has just keep his mouth shut and tells nothing about our country, the future of our country.
And no support from Keir.
No support from Keir, and Ayatollah Sadiq Khan, he does as well. He just, because we all know the police are getting suggestion from mayor. So basically, he just comes and says, oh, you cannot stay here, you're not allowed to use sound system, but it doesn't work for Palestinian, but only just coming pushing us. We are peacefully here. Every morning, I keep this, you see that road? Clean and tidy. Go look at the Palestinian protests. They attack police.
Well, brilliant reporting. Samara, before you go, briefly, if you can, with what's happening in Iran, there are going to be more asylum seekers in the months ahead.
Yes, there will be. And It begs the question, what do we do? I don't have an answer at this point. Unfortunately, the government certainly hasn't acted on this. We're seeing in Australia already issues with that when you look at the Iranian soccer team. These people have come from a terrible, terrible environment, and how can we check all of them? I don't know. We don't even have biometrics.
Yeah.
So it's a big question.
Well, listen, brilliant reporting. Look forward to our next on-air encounter. Samara Gill is Talk's lead breakfast reporter, soon to be replaced by Damien. I'm afraid it's a tough business.
Good luck, Damien. Good luck.
So much more to come. Don't go anywhere. It wasn't in the manifesto, but the Prime Minister is doubling down on illiberal Orwellian digital IDs. We've got the inside story next. It's 8:38.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.40 Talk Breakfast. Happy Wednesday one and all. Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. The brilliant Julia Hartley-Brewer up at 10. And Jezza back tomorrow, and he's doing my show on Friday as well with a bit of a switcheroo. I'm back Saturday at 6. Look forward to that. The Prime Minister is doubling down on his plans to introduce digital ID. Perhaps that's a political legacy that he seeks if he's out by the end of the summer. Have we got a clip from Darren Jones on this? Let's take a listen. Government Minister on digital ID.
In the future, you'll be able to get all of your government admin done in the time it takes to make a cup of tea. If I look at this example I've got here, you can see some of the tasks you're going to be able to do in the future. Now, the important point here is that digital ID is what makes this happen, because digital ID is how you will log in and prove who you are on the gov.uk app. It brings all of those services together onto your phone, and that's why it's different than logging into different websites across government in the way you have to today. But we want to build this in the way that works for you and so that you want to use it, and that's why we're consulting on how digital ID will be built and used in the future.
That was the Chief Secretary to the Treasury. That is Darren Jones. Phil Booth is the leader of No to ID. Phil, lovely to see you on a Wednesday morning. Well, the idea is you'd have all of this information on your phone. You'd have an app, and there's your tax details, your national insurance, what benefits you've got a right to or not got a right to, your health details. What's not to like?
Well, you say that's all on my phone, but is that the ID? Darren was saying that this is about making your access to public services better. I'm afraid the logging in bit is not the problem here. People are already getting benefits, already getting things which they need, but the ID bit is for their convenience, to join it all together, if you like. What I think they should be doing here is fixing the public services, making sure that they work, investing in those.
The point is, we're fixing a problem that doesn't exist, aren't we, Phil, with digital ID?
Absolutely. Well, it's not entirely a problem that doesn't exist. There are some people who don't have the sort of documents that you need, like a passport or a driving license or a number of other things. But generally nowadays, people are able to prove who they are. We do it all the time with our phones. We don't need the government to issue us an ID number for life in order to be able to do that. We need them to actually, give us the way to be able to access digital services.
Phil, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There may be some practical arguments for digital ID. The problem with it is that it could be weaponized against us by a future administration. That's the problem.
A future administration or this administration? We're already seeing the way in which this government has linked together information from one department and another has led to 23,000 families being taken off child benefit. That's got nothing to do with ID and everything to do with the fact that Home Office data, when looked at by another department, isn't up to date or it's incorrect, and they take an action based on the information they think they have. So this is not necessarily even malign. You don't have to go extreme on this. This is simply that if you give government a number, or the government gives you a number and decides that it's going to sort of just link up all the bits of information it thinks it has about you using that number, you're out of the equation. Your real life, what your circumstances all are, those things that you're still going to have to, provide to them in all their forms and everything, is going to continue to be a problem. But the ID, as you say, doesn't sort anything out. And what it means is lifelong tracking. That's the other side. As you say, some government that was wanting to track people through their lives, have a little dossier of everything, all of their interactions, not just with government, but what social media network they're on maybe, if you use it to sign up for a social media network, or what your bank account is. That would give any future malign actor in charge of the system a way to look you up and see all aspects of your life. This was true of Blair's National Identity Register back in the 2000s when he tried to introduce it, and it's equally true now that the Blair government in exile has convinced Keir Starmer to stand up and announce this scheme, and unfortunately Darren Jones is only talking about one aspect of it.
Well, Phil, I think we got a taste of this digital authoritarianism during the pandemic, when people had these vaccine passports on their phone in order to go and get a pint in their local. It was obscene. I called it out then, and I'm delighted to say I used this platform in this very studio to condemn it. So we've had a taste of it during COVID, haven't we? Government tyranny, again, because of so-called the public good. Phil, to what extent is this a left versus right thing? Is the philosophy and ideology underpinning digital ID inherently socialist?
No, as you've said, the COVID pass was done under a Conservative government. This is a power thing. This is not particularly of the left or the right. People on either side of the political spectrum, when they get into power, want to use it. It's certainly the case that ID cards have been introduced, as I say, under the Blair administration. No to ID fought that, and when the coalition came in, the Liberals and the Conservatives, their first act in Parliament was to repeal the Identity Cards Act. Now we have Keir Starmer doing this in the middle of a global crisis, and there isn't any box. If people read the sort of the consultation questions that they put out there and the 90-page document, they'll find there isn't a box in it that says, no, I don't want this. Yeah. So unfortunately, the only option people will have is, the next time they get to tick in a box.
And I've only got a couple of seconds, Phil, but what about this? It wasn't in the election manifesto of this Labour government.
Exactly. This is they're calling it a fundamental, a foundational ID. It wasn't even in their manifesto. People didn't vote for this, they don't want it, and we will get rid of it.
Phil, more power to you. We'll catch up soon. Lovely your company this morning. Talk a lot of sense. Phil Booth is the leader of No to ID. I'm not having it. It's deeply illiberal. I can't lie. COVID woke me up. I think it woke many of you up, realising that the authorities do not always have our best interests at heart. Open borders, net zero, COVID overreaction? Just 3 examples. Here's a voice note from Hannah on fuel prices.
Morning, Mark. Great show. I was in my local post office the other day and there was an elderly lady in tears because she was terrified. She'd heard cold weather was coming and she couldn't afford to order oil. And the minimum quantity you have to order for a tank is 500 litres. Well, it's too much. It's too much money. And in rural areas where there's no gas mains, we are relying for warmth. We rely on oil because electricity is too expensive. It's the people of this country are being impoverished every day by stupid decisions made by our stupid leaders. We need to drill and export our own oil and gas. We are poorer because of this, and there will be no growth without cheap and reliable energy.
Hannah, what a wonderful voice note. You're a hero. I loved your comments. I loved your delivery. I loved what you said, the tone of your voice, your facts. I would like Britain to become a fossil fuel superpower. And by the way, I'm more than happy with a couple of solar panels and a few windmills, but it's got to be a mix. And we are going to have fossil for decades to come. And without it, we are going down the toilet. Hannah, great voice note. More to come. Next up, more kids are going to receive free school meals. But is it the state's job to feed our children? I'll be asking the fearless Anne Widdecombe next.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
Something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain?
Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, folks, it's all kicking off, isn't it? Fuel prices through the roof. Inflation, the silent economic killer. The carbon monoxide of taxes. Low growth. Digital ID. NHS on its knees. What a mess. And then Tottenham.
90 minutes in 90 seconds. From The Sun.
Now, of course, not everyone cares about the fate of Tottenham Hotspur, the finest club in England, but I do because it's my team, and I'm afraid that the downfall continues. And who worse to speak to than the Arsenal reporter at the Sun newspaper, Josh Hall. Good morning, Josh.
Good morning. I'm sorry to hear that you're a Tottenham fan, actually. Condolences.
I need you to feel my pain, and no disrespect, you're a very fine football journalist, but this is, I mean, free fall is probably not an exaggeration, is it? What happened last night?
Yeah, I mean, it was another example of the mess that's going on in Tottenham at the moment. That's now 6 defeats in a row for them. It felt like the Champions League was a bit of a break away from the mess that was happening in the Premier League. And then it comes to that game, and the players were literally slipping all over the place. Antonin Kinski makes those 2 horrible mistakes. He's substituted off to have a goalkeeper substituted off after sort of 15, 16 minutes is unheard of. And you've got to feel sorry for him, really. It feels like maybe the manager, Igor Thiago, has made the mistake there by bringing him in. And he's almost in a situation now where you just wonder whether he can turn anything around. He's only been in the job for a matter of a few games now, and it could already be time to get rid of him and try and do something else.
Well, that's right. I think it's 4 losses back-to-back, 24 days. I mean, they need to stay up, so they're probably going to get rid, aren't they?
They certainly could. It could be something that happens. It felt like he was an appointment that they brought in to try and get that almost, the new manager bounce people talk about, and it's not worked. So, do they throw a roll of the dice again? Because if they do go down, it could really be detrimental for the club in the long term.
Bring back Harry Redknapp. I mean, I know he's pushing 80, but my goodness, he's done it before.
Yeah, he certainly has. And I think any sort of character that has a connection with the club could help Tottenham at the moment. Igor Thiago doesn't have that, maybe Ryan Mason, someone to come in and just lift the players up and have that bounce, because it seems like what's happening on the pitch just isn't clicking at all, and they might need something to rally them to keep them up.
Josh, I wish we had longer. Brilliant to chat. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Josh Hall is the excellent Arsenal reporter at The Sun newspaper. Disappointment for Liverpool, losing 1-0 to Galatasaray. And my goodness, what a night it nearly was for Newcastle, who suffered a last-minute penalty against Barcelona to make it 1-1. Listen to me with all my football talk. Who knew? Let's do something far more important than the beautiful game, and that is the news that more children are going to receive free school meals. But is it the state's job to feed our kids? Anne Widdecombe is a former Home Office minister, best-selling author and broadcaster. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning to you.
And we don't want to see children go hungry. We want a proper meal in their stomachs. You know as well as I do, they won't learn without it. But is that the government's job?
Well, the primary responsibility, obviously, for feeding children is that of the parents, and that is quite obvious. But it has been the case now for many, many years, I mean, going right back to my childhood, that children from poorer families could receive free lunches. And the benefit of that, of course, is that at least school lunches are halfway nutritious, and they're getting some proper nutrition. But the question is, when do you stop? I mean, we all remember in COVID, when as a supposedly temporary measure, the government allowed children to receive free meals during holidays as well as term time. And then, of course, everybody wanted that made permanent. So I think we do have to be very careful what we do. It is primarily parental responsibility. But equally, free school lunches are in a way part of the benefits system. And therefore, subject to exactly the same rules and decisions.
Well, Anne, as you know, this will stick in the craw to many of my viewers and listeners who work very hard. They're battling inflation, they're battling mortgages, rents, everything's going up, isn't it? And they take none too kindly to their taxes, subsidising other families who already receive welfare state support to feed their kids, and many will feel that we're doing it twice, therefore.
I don't think we're doing it twice. I do think you've got to be very careful how you apply the rules. And I do think, as I've already said, that primarily it's a parental responsibility, not a state responsibility.
Yeah.
The state is the fallback, not the primary provider. And the same at the very far end of the scale. The same goes for elderly care. We've now got into a position in this country where we think that the state is primarily responsible, and it's not. In other countries, they will actually means test families before they supply elder care. So coming back to the age group that we're dealing with now, I mean, it's much the same principle. The primary responsibility is with the parents. But obviously, there is a role for the state, a limited role, but there is a role for the state where there's genuine poverty.
Now, Anne, you left the Conservative Party and joined the Brexit Party to get Brexit done. You've been on the right side of history more than once in your political career. You have since backed Nigel Farage and Reform UK. What's your appraisal of the Reform UK project to date?
Well, we're obviously doing extremely well. We are ahead in all the opinion polls, and we've been there for about a year. So, in fact, we've been there for more than a year. Now, if any other party had maintained that sort of lead that consistently, everybody would just assume they were going into government. And I think it's very likely that we will. But we've got big challenges ahead, and we know it. We're putting together now a team. We've already started doing that and announced some of them. We need to look at if we've got a team that's ready to be a cabinet of the future, and the not too distant future, 3 years' time. We have to do that. We have to refine a lot of the policies. The direction of travel is clear enough, but we need to refine the policies that underpin them.
Would you like the party economic offer to be a little drier than it currently is, Anne? Some people would argue the Achilles heel, the soft underbelly of Nigel's plans are the economic ones.
I'm not sure that that's true, because essentially what reform says is, that it's business and it's enterprise which actually pays for all the public services that we enjoy. And therefore you make the country attractive to inward investment. You try to stop the drain of people who are now leaving the country, of successful people leaving the country. And therefore you try to lower the taxes. Well, in fact, you do lower the taxes, both business and personal, in order to provide the growth. You can't have economic growth without lower taxes. Equally, we can't just sit down and say, Allah, Liz Truss, we're going to do it all in the first 5 minutes, because we're not.
Anne, wonderful to see you. Let me urge my viewers and listeners to sign up to your Substack. It really is one of the best, because the thing about you, Anne, you're out of politics, so you can actually say what you really think.
Yes, I can say what I really think, but I have to be very careful that when I'm saying what I think, that people don't assume that that's what Reform also thinks.
No,
My Substack is my own. It's my own. It's not Reform's.
My thanks to Anne Widdecombe, who flirts on a daily basis with national treasure status. In fact, there's no flirtation. It's a full love affair. Who doesn't love Anne Widdecombe? And she's, by the way, a wise voice. I think that Nigel Farage could do worse than to have a weekly council with Anne Widdecombe. She's been in government. She's a true Conservative to her core. She's got the brain the size of a planet, common sense. Honestly, I'm not going to be neutral about Anne Widdecombe. I'm a fan, but listen, it's all about opinions, isn't it? So much more to come. You're listening to Talk Breakfast, and we've got a big exclusive coming from our international editor. You will not believe this story, and it doesn't bode too well for the Muslim faith. It's a shocker. So much to come. Talk Breakfast, don't go anywhere.
Over the past 36 hours, the United States and its partners have launched Operation Epic Fury, one of the largest, most complex, most overwhelming military offensives the world has ever seen. Nobody's seen anything like it. We have hit hundreds of targets in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard facilities, Iranian air defense systems. Just now, it was announced that we knocked out 9 ships plus their naval building, all in a matter of literally minutes. Iran's formerly supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead.
I spoke to you about the situation in the Gulf and explained that the United Kingdom was not involved in the strikes on Iran. That remains the case. The basis of our decision is the collective self-defense of long-standing friends and allies and protecting British lives. That is in accordance with international law, and we are publishing a summary of our legal advice. We are not joining these strikes, but we will continue with our defensive actions in the region.
Mr Farage, would a reform government have allowed US forces to use UK air bases for offensive operations in Iran?
Yes is the answer to your question. I would have said to the Americans, please do use our bases. We will be supportive of you on this.
There were a series of very loud blasts in the area of Dubai that I'm based in. That's in the Marina area. It's a very touristy area, actually. those blasts were the loudest we've heard yet, but equally we are reassured that they are most likely the sound of interception by the UAE's quite sophisticated THAAD interception kit. That is the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
.9, top of the morning, Mark Dolan with you until 10 a.m. in for the brilliant Jeremy Kyle, who returns tomorrow. He's doing Thursday and Friday. I'm back Saturday. And then from next week, we're back to normal, where I'll do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Lovely to have your company, your calls, your texts, your voice notes, and all of the rest of it. Breaking this morning, better late than never. After 10 days, HMS Dragon sets sail for Cyprus. But is the Iran war a tale of Britain's national decline? Plus, a pro-Iranian hate march is to be banned this weekend in central London. Common sense or an assault on free speech? You can hear the show on DAB+ in app and online, or you can watch us. Head to YouTube and search Talk, and up we pop. And let's talk to Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott, live from the Middle East. Good morning, Isabel.
Good morning.
Isabel, you're sitting on a massive story. This is a Talk exclusive. What have you got for us?
So this is an extraordinary story about child marriage in our own country. And this was an illegal wedding of two teenagers that was conducted by a Muslim cleric in a mosque in the UK. And these were young people. The young couple had just turned 16 when the Islamic preacher agreed to marry them. Now, that is completely against the law, and rightly so. And neither of their parents had any idea. And we have exclusively talked to the father of the young woman involved. Naturally, when he found out, he was apoplectic, and the whole thing was referred to the police. And the cleric in question was convicted and found guilty of conducting an illegal marriage ceremony of children. And it is quite an astonishing thing to have happened in our country. And I suppose tells you something wider about very, very different values. I should say that the young woman and the young man, I understand that the young man, who was just 16 at the time, was Polish, brought up a Catholic, and had converted to Islam. And the girl in this case was British, mixed race, and again was brought up as a Christian and converted to Islam while she was a young teenager in a school in Portsmouth.
Might you interpret that as brainwashing?
Do you know that I think the father is best to speak for himself on this? And, you know, we've got extensive footage of how he sees it, but he felt that his daughter converted at school because her school was full of Muslims. You know, this was in Portsmouth and later on elsewhere in the country. And she went from being this young lady with a very bright future who had a dream originally that potentially she was going to be in the armed forces. We've got a lovely picture of her in the cadets at school, a very bright young lady. And then one day he was clearing out her bedroom, and underneath her bed, to his absolute astonishment, he found both a prayer mat and a copy of the Quran.
So she goes from a uniform to a hijab. And the issue you've got, brainwashing is strong, isn't it? That's a partisan word, Isabel, so we're in no position to use it. But you could certainly say that children like to blend in, and that may be what happened on this occasion.
I think that's exactly what happened. And, you know, her father makes no secret of the fact that she came from a troubled family. You know, he was doing his level best to bring up children as a single parent. The mother He's very open about this. The girl's mother had drug problems and was not able to look after the children. And so Dad, who's called Mark, he took over and was bringing the children up single-handedly. And he struggled. He's open about that. It's tough. We all know it is. And she basically went off the rails. And he talked very compellingly about how one day he found some drugs in her bedroom, and it was clear that she'd got herself drawn into some type of county lines type situation, and that she was, if not dealing any drugs herself, she'd got caught up with the wrong type of people. And you know what he did? He marched her down to the police station with the drugs, handed his daughter in, handed the drugs in. And in that case, the police, they took it seriously. I'm sure they delivered an appropriate warning, and she didn't face any further action. But she was obviously a bit of a wild one, and went to live with I think one of her grandparents up north, moved away from the dad's house, and ended up actually in care. Now, it's important to say that the dad, at no point was she taken away from her natural parents, from her father. She voluntarily, she wanted to go into some other setting. And it was when she was in care that this illegal wedding happened.
Well, you've sat down with this father. It's an extraordinary interview. It's an extraordinary exclusive, which I think shines a light on subcultures within our society, Isabel, which exist in parallel to not just our culture, but perhaps the rule of law as well. Let's take a listen to the father on his reaction to his daughter dressing differently as she converted to Islam and was illegally married underage at an imam. Take a listen.
And tell me about how it felt the first time you saw her dressed differently. She was wearing Muslim clothes.
Very mixed emotions, really. A bit of anger in there, because obviously it just goes against the grain of my family's religion more than anything,
So tell me about the first time that you saw her. She was wearing a burqa.
Yes, yeah, proper burqa, full head scarf, and yeah, it was pretty drastic, if that makes sense.
Quite radical.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, radical, really.
Let's take another clip now, and this is the father on evidence that he found.
There was a few pictures on Instagram or one of them sort of sites of her all like really pretty. It looked like a wedding dress, to be fair. And they approached her about it, and she said, "No, I didn't get married," and all that. And then they went under her bed and found a marriage certificate, which I've got a copy of it here. It's a bit blurry, but.
And the police have the original
they do indeed,
copy
yes.
of that. So talk us through, if you just have a look at it, talk us through what it says and what shocked you about what you saw.
It's got my name there, and it's got a signature, which I was in Portsmouth. That's in Northampton. So
it says father on there.
And it says father, so someone's faked my name.
Well, this is a very important piece of journalism, courtesy of our international editor. If you want to see the whole interview, the whole report, I would urge you to go to YouTube once we've come off air. I'll get in trouble with Julia now. At some point today, go and listen to it. Talk's YouTube channel for the full report. Isabel, can you tell us about the mental state of the father? How did he seem to you? What's he been through emotionally?
I think he's really been through the ringer. I got the impression of a guy that's just done his level best. They obviously don't have a huge amount of resources. He's always worked. He's not somebody who's wanted to ever depend on the state. He tried really hard to bring his kids up in the way that he wanted them to be. He didn't want a repeat of the cycle in which the mother had drug issues and no doubt other mental health issues and so on. And it was all going fine. His daughter, we have a lovely picture of her as dressed in her cadet uniform. She's a bright girl. And here's the good news. They've all moved on from this. So this case took a while to get to court. It was actually it only reached a conclusion a few weeks ago. And the imam in question, people might be interested to know what he got by way of punishment. Well, the answer to that is he got a 15-week prison sentence, but I'm sorry to say that it was suspended, which means that he's not going to jail. at all. It's basically a rap over the knuckles. Now, his excuse was he didn't know they were underage, or he didn't know what the law was. I mean, it's a complete nonsense, isn't it? He didn't do any due diligence there. And as the dad said there, his signature was forged quite plainly. But the further good news is that the young lady who did give her dad permission to tell the story, she has now got a good job. She's working in healthcare. She's still a Muslim. She doesn't wear the hijab, for the best of my knowledge. She doesn't wear the full thing, as we showed in the picture there. But she is still a practicing Muslim. And I think he just regrets, the father, that she ever got caught up with so much heavy Muslim influence at a very young and impressionable age. But she's on the right track. He's on the right track. I think it's a cautionary tale.
Does this suggest that Islamic practices within the UK which work against our laws or our culture are not a conspiracy theory? Warnings from the President of the United States that Sharia law is happening in our towns and cities. Does this story give those suggestions, those allegations, credence?
I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg here. I think there is so much to investigate. This has been a pretty slow creep for many years, and has now, the pace of it has accelerated. And the kind of measures that Keir Starmer proposes under this so-called new Islamophobia definition, this new offence that's being created, will not tackle it. Now, none of us at Talk, and certainly I don't have any problem whatsoever with moderate Islam. You know I live in a Muslim country. It's not an issue. What we don't want is a parallel legal system in our own country, parallel legal operations and judgments being made, and this kind of thing, child marriage. That is not something that we should at all be having to worry about as parents in the UK.
What do you think of the view that it's probably just a matter of time, if you look at the demographics, Isabel, that Britain will become a majority Muslim country? Is that a conspiracy theory, the idea that the indigenous culture and population will simply be outnumbered at a certain point?
Well, I know a lot of people spend a lot of time being very exercised about this, and I understand that, because we ought to be proud of our own culture and our heritage. And I do think that, as I said before, in the last couple of years, and even this year alone, the pace of change in our culture is remarkable. You see it before your very eyes. Just go shopping at the moment in a supermarket in the UK, and you're seeing a lot of Ramadan Kareem signs, which is a whole new thing. Companies, fashion retailers like Next are now selling quite extensive ranges of traditional Muslim Islamic dress. Nothing wrong with that per se, but it is a massive shift in our culture, and it is now, having been, I think, below the radar for a long time, it is increasingly apparent. And there are people pushing back. There's a guy, social media influencer called Samuel Leeds, who's on a mission to buy churches. I think that was fascinating. Wealthy guy wants to buy churches that are disused and preserve them for Christianity, or protect them from being converted into flats and so on. We've got to fight for our culture. That doesn't mean we don't allow other cultures to exist, but we shouldn't just allow our own culture to be completely overshadowed and replaced.
Most definitely. Look, Isabel, Britain has a successful multi-ethnic society. Most people have no problem with that. It's not going to cease to be a multi-ethnic society. Doesn't matter how many repatriations happen if Rupert Lowe becomes Prime Minister. We are a multi-ethnic society. But the issue is around Islam itself. Now, we have moderate Muslims, don't we? You are a Reform UK supporter. The Shadow Home Secretary for Reform UK is a Muslim person, and that is Zia Youssef, who used to, of course, be the chairman of the party. You've got the Reform UK mayoral candidate for London, a very impressive person, Layla Cunningham, a practicing Muslim. But there are some that would say that's fine, but actually it's a religion, a faith and a culture which is not compatible with Western or British values. What do you say to that?
I say that here in Dubai, live in a place that seems to manage to have all sorts of religions living harmoniously alongside each other. And there is one dominant one here, and of course there is, rightly so. It's Islam.
Yeah.
It is very lightly worn. It's proudly there. And we're all, very aware that it's Ramadan at the moment, and those observations are baked into the institutions here, just like Christianity should continue to be baked into our institutions. So schools should continue to observe Easter, not spring breaks. Schools should continue to observe Christmas, not winter breaks. Let us not unnecessarily bow down to other religions. Let us not deny our own religion. It is not necessary. It's perfectly possible to have a clear identity as a country, say we are a Christian country, but you know what? The rest of you are more than welcome to celebrate your own religions, to observe your own beliefs and so on, and we respect that. But it doesn't mean we need to give way to you.
But sorry to labour the point, Isabel, because it's just really representing what so many of my viewers and listeners feel. And I know, you'll share this concern, but some people think that, this is not an issue with Hinduism or Christianity overseas. It's not a problem with Judaism, that it's a unique issue with Islam, that notwithstanding the millions of peace-loving British Muslims who make a huge contribution, they are our friends, they're our neighbours, sometimes they're our lovers, no problem. My optician is a fabulous, wonderful Muslim lady. But some people think that Islam uniquely seeks to dominate other cultures when it arrives, and that with the demographic change, what you're going to do is lose Britain in the long run.
Well, I think it's an interesting debate, but I think that we've got to stop bracketing Islam in one big pot. There are very different interpretations of it, which is why we are where we are in the Middle East, with all the different rivalries and factions that there are here. And moderate Islam is very different to the form of Islam that we see preached by the mad mullahs of Iran.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to be really careful about not lumping those two things together.
A fascinating and nuanced response. I learnt a lot talking to you, Isabel, as I always do. Brilliant conversation, and what an exclusive. Thank you so much for bringing it to us. Isabel Oakeshott is Talk's international editor, and I would urge you to go and watch that full interview. A father whose daughter converted to Islam, then illegally got married underage by an imam. Just go to Talk's YouTube channel and you will find the full interview under videos. Sterling work. I've got a voice note on breakfast clubs and free school meals. Is it the state's job to feed our children? Take a listen to this.
Back in the year 2000, when I was married, my husband used to bring home £1,180 a month, which doesn't sound very much, but it is 30 years ago. My friend, I had to live off that. I had a mortgage and car loan, which came to £600. So I had £580 a month to get all the council tax, gas, electric, petrol, clothes, food, blah, blah, blah. My friend had two girls living on her own, single parent. She was getting £1,500 a month in universal credit. And then free school breakfasts on top of that. So her kids could have bacon sandwiches in the morning for nothing. And mine would have to buy theirs. And I said, well, you can only, at breakfast club, you can only have toast, because I haven't got enough for two kids to have bacon sandwiches. It's not fair.
It's not fair, is it? And families make tough choices. Some people have 2 or 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. Their taxes are subsidising free meals for families who already have access to full welfare provision. Yes, they're not rolling in cash, but there is state support already. It's my view they're paying twice. Folks, so much more to get through. Jury trials set to be curtailed for the supposedly less serious offences. Plus, common sense from the Home Office with the banning of pro-Iranian marches this weekend. I'll get full reaction next from potentially Britain's most fearless journalist.
Good morning to you. This is Tour the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just breaking news in the last couple of moments. Extraordinary news. Not just that the police have arrived at the Sandringham estate where Prince Andrew, as was now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, is currently living since being thrown out of the Windsor estate. The police have arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. It's an extraordinary revelation. And certainly what's been contained in the Epstein files as released in the last few weeks. It's his 66th birthday today. What a birthday present that is.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, I've got a very apposite text message from Red at 24 minutes past 9 on a Wednesday morning on Talk Breakfast, who says, "Good morning, Mark. Feeding our children would be one thing, but currently we're paying for the kids of the third world. Not just that, of course, we're accommodating them, aren't we? It's bed and board. Let's not forget now, a quarter of migrants on universal benefit." Here's a question for you. Who voted for that? And also, I thought immigration, mass uncontrolled immigration, was good for the economy. I do hope we weren't lied to by the establishment. I've got another story for you. By the way, the pro-Iran hate march has been banned over the weekend. We'll come to that shortly. But what about this headline in The Telegraph? African leaders set to demand Chagos-style slavery reparations. Well, the senior political commentator of The Telegraph is Annabel Denham, and she joins us now. Good morning, Annabel.
Good morning, Mark.
Annabel, what's the story here?
Well, I think that this was absolutely inevitable once we started going down this balmy path of paying to give away the Chagos Islands. They are now framing it as some form of reparations, and that has opened the door for other countries to do the same, countries which have been pushing for this for some time, and why wouldn't they? But the problem, is that reparations is a harebrained idea. How far back into history do you go? How on earth do you quantify the amount of money that ought to be handed over? What are you basing it on? Not to mention the fact that, in case people hadn't noticed, we're in pretty dire straits economically, so we couldn't afford it anyway. But as I say, we're on this slippery slope now where the world is looking at Britain and thinking we're a complete chump that will genuflect to international law and to international human rights legislation in particular, and therefore they can come clamouring for money from us, however spurious the claims might be.
Well, yes, and this glosses over the fact that we fought hard with blood and treasure to end slavery, and our empire, Annabel, was far more benevolent than all of the others, which is why we have a Commonwealth of Nations who decided to remain diplomatically and culturally close. You've also got the small matter of the fact that all of the people involved in these so-called historic crimes are dead.
Well, exactly.
Everyone's dead. They're all dead. The people that did it are dead. The victims are dead. They're all dead. Everyone's dead.
That's absolutely right.
Sorry, Annabel, I want to apologise.
I don't disagree with you.
Everyone's dead.
Well, it's all sins of the father type stuff, isn't it? At what point do you wipe the slate clean? You're right to point out that Britain's role in ending the ghastly slave trade, and not to mention the fact that many of these countries were involved in the slave trade themselves in some way. In exporting slaves to America, to Britain, for instance. So a number of them, their governments at the time, were complicit in all of this.
African kings put their people in cages on the beach to be collected by ships.
Well, Exactly. And to your point, you and I are not responsible for the behaviour of our ancestors. And the left are completely obsessed with this idea, and they're not going to let it go. As I say, they will feel emboldened by this Chagos decision. Let's not forget that the Mauritian government now is bringing in tax cuts for its citizens based on the £35 billion that we will be handing to them in order to give away a major strategic asset, whilst taxes here are going to reach record levels. So, it's just the most baffling, bizarre decision. And I do wonder whether there will be some sort of climb down. We had the Foreign Office Minister, Hamish Faulkner, talking about a pause in the process a couple of weeks ago. It then transpired that perhaps he'd spoken out of turn and he backtracked. But I just wonder, now that the Trump White House is fully aware of this dreadful, well, I hesitate to call it a deal because that implies that both sides are getting something, but they have clearly refused to give it their endorsement. Trump is apparently furious about it. So, I just wonder whether this might be Labour's 18th or 19th U-turn. We can only hope.
We can definitely only hope. What about the scrapping of jury trials? Do you think that they'll get that one across the line, Annabelle?
Well, it certainly looks as though they will at this stage. MPs are giving it their blessing, which you'd expect. Obviously, Labour have got a whopping majority in the Commons. Will the upper chamber come in and properly scrutinise this legislation? They've done some fine work, I believe, on the assisted suicide bill. So, perhaps there will be some ping pong there, which forces the government in some kind of climb down. But, I'm personally pretty appalled by this, the way in which Labour are sweeping away our most sacred ancient liberties, sweeping away something that Britain instituted and then exported across the world because it was a system that worked so well. Now, as I say, it's just being swept aside without ceremony or mercy. The government is justifying this on grounds that it will help with the backlogs in the system, ensuring that people are getting justice sooner. But, the problems that they say they're going to solve could actually be resolved by appointing competent people to run His Majesty's Courts and Tribunals service and putting more money into the system. I'm afraid to say that the Tories have a lot to answer for on this. They believed that there were few votes in penal reform. They refused to really grasp the nettle when it came to fixing our criminal justice system. And this is now the situation that we find ourselves in as a consequence. We need major investment going into that, and perhaps we could save money from the welfare bill, which apparently is going to hit £400 billion by the end of this decade. Or indeed, perhaps we could backtrack on that Chagos arrangement.
Annabelle, we know that Donald Trump is on the political right. He's a Republican president. But are British Conservatives torn over his actions in the Middle East?
I think it would depend on who you speak to in the Conservative Party. They range from being very hawkish, absolutely behind the decision of the US and Israel to launch those strikes a couple of weeks ago. There are others who, perhaps looking at domestic polling, the fact that there really isn't widespread support among the British electorate for a war in Iran, and wondering whether we should take a more cautious approach. But I think on one thing they are very much united, and there's a unanimous agreement, which is that Keir Starmer has handled this extremely badly, to such an extent that it's done reputational damage to this country. I think we come across as a bad faith actor, that we refused to allow them access to our bases initially. Then there was that volte face. Then it transpired that Keir Starmer apparently was in favour of it, but he was talked down by a quartet of cabinet ministers, which really just goes to show how shot his authority is. ultimately, the US is our most important ally. Israel is another important ally to this country, and we refused to support them when they are trying to crush a theocratic, dreadful, oppressive regime that slaughters its citizens, has summary executions and hangings, not to mention abuses of human rights, its treatment of women, and the fact that it is the largest state sponsor of terror overseas that is funding, these proxies, Hamas, Houthis, Hezbollah, and causing major regional instability, across the Gulf. I talked about the US and Israel. It isn't just those two countries. It's actually our allies in the Gulf region who are utterly appalled by the fact that we have failed to take action. And there's no real sense of urgency among this Labour government about what's going on. Look at how slow we were to deploy any warships to the region. It's just so deeply humiliating for a country that once ruled the seas.
Annabelle, fantastic to see you. Let me tell you that you always wreak havoc when you're on Question Time, because you're so articulate, and I'm afraid you're right about everything. Thank you for joining us. Annabelle Denham is the senior political commentator at The Telegraph newspaper. More to come, but here's a voice note from Pete, because I had a conversation this morning. Is it the job of the government to feed our kids? Here's Pete. Take it away, Pete.
Morning, Mark. Pete from Lancashire. So last year, mate, on top of the breakfast clubs and all that, where I live in Lancashire, we went for school uniform fitting, and there was two lines. There was people of the working class and there was people on benefit, and the benefit line was huge, and they were getting free school uniforms. Not only that, very, very little or very, very few in that line could speak a word of English, mate. It's absolutely outrageous. Anyway, mate, take care. Bye.
Pete, thank you for such an important voice note. I really appreciate that you all take the time to call or leave a voice note or drop a message. I know you're busy on a Wednesday morning, but you getting that voice note out there, Pete, is so important for people to wake up and realise what's happening in the country. You've got that long line of people that are not paying into the system they're taking out, getting free school uniforms. That shorter line of those paying is made up of hard-working Brits who pay their taxes and who are struggling with rent and mortgages and inflation and the cost of living, the silent monoxide killer of inflation. Listen, Pete, thank you for that brilliant voice note. Keep them coming. More to come. It is 9:35. By the way, slavery reparations, right? Everyone involved, they're all dead. Everyone's dead.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk Breakfast. It is 9:37. Thank you for your company. Mark Dolan with you until 10. The Queen of Talk, Julia Hartley-Brewer, live at 10 a.m. I'm back on Saturday, and then as of next week, we're back to normal Friday, Saturday, Sunday Talk Breakfast. The brilliant Jeremy Kyle, Monday through Thursday, as the Americans say. Sally says, good morning, Mark. Good to see you. I don't understand why we take asylum seekers from war-torn countries. Why aren't these men required to stay and fight? Would our young men be able to seek asylum elsewhere if we were at war? I doubt it. Some of these countries must be becoming very depleted in men of fighting age. It's my view that any Iranians who wish to attend a pro-Iranian march, who attended one of these morning sessions, should go home, with any university students of any nationality losing their place. Sally, excellent stuff. Andrew in Fife, Mark, this nation is sick of being punished for being successful. Why do we have to pay for people with a litter of kids with no job, yet we get no child benefits just because I made an effort and got a career? They come out significantly better than us per month, and everyone is sick of it. Andrew, thank you for that. You're so right about Scotland. I went to university there for 4 years, Edinburgh, beautiful city, and I'm horrified by what's happened to Scotland. Did you know that you would need to make £55,000 a year in Scotland to have the same income as a family of 3 on benefits? 55 grand. It's a huge amount of money. You'd have to earn that just to be the same as a benefits family. Make it make sense. So we are seeing potentially the scrapping of jury trials for supposedly less serious offences. Is this a step in the right direction? Will it speed up the judicial process? Will it bring justice to victims more rapidly? Who better to ask than John Cooper, KC, a human rights lawyer. Good morning, Mr. Cooper.
Good morning, and I love the way you and Julie always say I'm a human rights lawyer. I also do crime and other matters as well, so I'm multi-talented.
Well, listen, I've got no doubt about that, John, and I've got no doubt you're worth every penny to your clients. What do you make of this? Because the legal establishment seem to be at odds with the government over this move.
Well, yes, I think the important thing to say here is that the criminal justice system, like the health service, it's no different in many respects, is on its knees. I'm not talking about the lawyers. I'm talking about buildings falling down. I'm talking about delays. I'm talking about courts not sitting. And that's been the case for about 20 years. Multiple governments of different complexions. It really has happened all over that period of time. And also, let's put to bed one constant reference, it's COVID. This was happening well before COVID. So, Mark, let's just put that marker down now that something needs to be done. And as a general point, a lot of what is being proposed by the government is good. And I don't think many people will with the money that's being put in, about £2 billion, into dilapidations, increasing the speed in which justice is achieved, all that sort of thing.
And to be fair to Labour, they've inherited a right royal mess, which goes back to probably the austerity years of 2010.
Mark, spot on. And so, therefore, it's not a political issue. It's just a neglect issue over years and decades. And as I say, I think there's cross-party opinion, in fact, in many respects, cross-opinion around the country that something needed to be done. And a lot of what is being done here, guided particularly by what Lord Leveson has said, in part, or in substantial part, needs desperately to be done. And as I say, £2 billion is not to be sneezed at. Needed, but not to be sneezed at. Now, the problem is juries. Because the research, independent research, effectively, without getting bogged down with stats, has shown that it's going to make very little difference whatsoever to the problem that needs to be resolved. But from what I'm hearing, for many, many years, Lord Chancellors and Home Secretaries have been badgered by the Ministry of Justice to actually sort juries out, cut juries, save money. And I suspect that this is a money-saving exercise, which may well save some money, but on the other hand, is not going to have any effect upon fast delivery and efficient delivery of justice. And really, that's the crux of it. Do we want to lose something that's very important to us? I think most people would agree to that. Is very important to us simply because of a minor money-saving exercise, which A, doesn't save much money, and B, really badly affects the justice system for all of us.
Is it fair to say, John, that activist judges exist, politically biased judges with an agenda? Is that another aggravating factor in relation to this policy?
Well, there are a number of aggravating factors. The fact is, if you do a job for long enough, I know this as a lawyer, you probably know this as a journalist, doesn't make us bad people. We get jaded, perhaps, at times, heard before, oh no, not that again. What you don't get with that is a jury, with a jury. But the other thing to mention about juries, I don't know whether your viewers will be surprised to hear that only about 2% of cases go before juries, and only about 40% of those cases turn out to be trials. It's very little. 98% of cases are already going before magistrates' courts. And so as far as that's concerned, I think the problem is exaggerated in terms of the effect it will have of the abolition of this part of the jury system. But as far as other aspects are concerned, you're absolutely right. People are getting very concerned about this across the board. And I don't know whether you saw the very telling speech of that woman, the MP who was raped and very sadly and tragically abused. And she was going those horrific details of what she went through, and yet still said, in her view, the abolition of the jury would not affect in one way positively the position that she was in.
This was the very brave Charlotte Nichols, who's a great politician, a very decent person, and she gave up her right to anonymity to talk about this in the House. Let's take a listen if we can, John. Take a listen to this.
As after being raped at an event that I attended in my capacity as a Member of Parliament, I waited 1,088 days to go to court. It is because I have been raped that I'm as passionate as I am about what it means for a justice system to be truly victim-focused. It is because I have endured every indignity that our broken criminal justice system could mete out that I care what kind of reform will actually deliver justice for survivors and victims of crime more widely.
John, if anyone, you will be a great aficionado of the counter-arguments, the devil's advocate. Are there any positives to the reduction of the number of cases that are prosecuted via a jury? Are there any arguments for?
I try to be fair, and it's part of my job to look at both sides of the argument, as I say, which is why perhaps I started at the head of our discussion by saying a lot of what the government are proposing to help our criminal justice system is good and everyone wants, which is why MPs in the House are being rather targeted in their attack on this bill, so that they don't throw everything out, as it were, simply because they're attacking juries. But on your direct point, no, there are no advantages, in my opinion. And I hope I've shown myself as balanced here by saying there's lots of good in this bill, but as far as this jury thing is concerned, there are no advantages whatsoever. It doesn't solve the problem that the government are trying to deal with. It effectively, as far as any delay is concerned, doesn't affect delays. There's a lot more that could be done. And it is an important principle that we have a jury. The problem, if I can just say this one, I don't go too on, because I know we're time restricted. But the thing about the jury system, the thing about the criminal justice system is that people will have a different attitude to it than if it was happening with the National Health Service. Because people think, naturally so, well, it's not going to affect us, it's never going to affect us. But we all are at risk of being wrongly accused of something sometime. And one day, perhaps our families, our friends, or indeed ourselves may be very much in need of a jury. Final point. It's all right for the Justice Minister to say these are scratches on the knee. These are potentially 3-year imprisonment risks people are having. And some of these lower level crimes, if you are convicted, you have a criminal conviction. And when it comes to a job, for instance, that's the important thing, the conviction, not necessarily what you're convicted for. We need to be very careful before we throw out these protections.
John Cooper KC is a leading lawyer across a range of jurisdictions. And John, I don't know if you can help me. I was running into Tesco the other day on a double yellow line. I got a ticket. What can you do? If I pay you £1,000 an hour, can you fix it?
I can say that my rates are competitive, Mark, you know.
Worth every penny. John, thanks. We'll catch up soon. John Cooper KC, who is a lawyer, human rights, criminal stuff, you name it, he does it. No doubt to a very high standard. Well, we had an extraordinary exclusive story courtesy of Isabel Oakeshott, our brilliant Talk international editor. This is a father that found out his daughter had been illegally married and had become Muslim by somebody that was an imam. It was against the law, deeply concerning. The headline, my daughter converted to Islam at 14, then was illegally married at 16. Here's a voice note from Jim on that subject.
Morning, Mark. Just listening to Isabella's story about the young girl who got married. It must be heartbreaking for the father. And yet Starmer and his bunch of lunatics want 16-year-olds to vote. Most 16-year-olds haven't a clue who they are or what they're doing. and it's just another sad state of affairs that this world is in.
Well, it is. Jim, thank you for your brilliant voice note. Got a great message on X from Mark Eglinton, who is enjoying the show, and he said this country is a bin fire currently. I can't disagree. Well put. Lots more to go. Speaking of bin fire, how appropriate. It's not just thrown together, is it? It's a year since the bins stopped being collected in Birmingham. What is happening in England's second city? We'll do that next. It's 9:47 Talk Breakfast.
Every Monday to Wednesday, midnight until 1, it is Talkback.
Such a shortage of housing. You've got landlords, right, have taken that on board, and it's an absolute disgrace.
Your stories, your opinions, it is your chance to have your say. So they're literally just being rented out as hotels, basically.
Yeah, rent a load of hotels.
Well, that has really shone a light for me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
9:49 Talk Breakfast, and the Chancellor Rachel Reeves is currently addressing the House of Commons in a select committee in regard to the cost of energy, petrol prices, all the rest of it. Let's take a listen. Let's head to the House of Commons.
But finance ministers can do to de-escalate, and it sits with the Foreign Office and the Prime Minister, just picking away at what the Treasury can actually do to help de-escalate this conflict.
Well, my primary role in all of this is to monitor and respond to the economic impacts, but of course working closely with my US counterpart, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and my European counterparts. We also have a role to play in ensuring, for example, that our defensive actions in the Middle East to defend our allies are properly funded, and as I said in the chamber on Monday, we've given the MOD access to the Special Reserve to be able to fund all additional deployments in the Middle East.
Hardly a commanding political presence, is she? Quite simply out of her depth, like a drowning puppy, but what can you do? Welcome to hell, folks. We're trapped in a handcart. We're going to hell. Listen, folks, let's have a look now at this other story. It's a year since the bins stopped being collected in Birmingham, still not resolved. England's second city, a proud, great city. What's the latest? Richard Parkin is a Birmingham councillor for the Conservatives in Sutton Redicap. Good morning, Richard. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
Birmingham's a great city, isn't it? Great people, a great economy, very culturally diverse, all the rest of it. We ought to be celebrating England's second city, but it's becoming a bit of an embarrassment in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I mean, I'm a Brummie through and through. I was born in the city and my family have lived here, been here all my life. And you know, it's damaging our international reputation, and it's been a year, as you say. I mean, obviously it's an anniversary which no one is celebrating here in Birmingham. We're in complete despair at the situation. It's actually been 430 days since the first bin strike was declared. The first intermittent bin strike.
Shocking.
Was declared on January the 6th last year. Can you believe it? And we're actually further away from resolving the crisis now than we were 12 months ago, because the council have stopped talking to the unions. I think the last time they had a meeting with them was in May last year. And no industrial dispute ever gets resolved unless two parties are around the table talking to each other, does it?
No, most definitely. How, Richard, has it affected the daily lives of any of my viewers and listeners living in Birmingham and the surrounding area?
Right, well, if anybody in Birmingham speaks to you, they'll tell you that they've had an unreliable household waste collection service. Because they have now, the council have got agency crews, and councils from elsewhere are helping out.
Which is costing money.
14.6 million by the end of March. That's going to cost the taxpayers of Birmingham. But we've had no recycling collections for 14 months. This is the second year of the garden waste service being cancelled, and we can't have any bulky waste collection. So sometimes you used to be able to pay the council to pick up bulky waste, and because of that, it's suspended.
I'm really confused that no recycling. I thought the left were like really into the environment, Richard. What's going on there?
You'd have thought so, wouldn't you? I mean, the figures are astonishing, actually. Birmingham had one of the worst recycling rates before the strike at about 24%, but it's now 14%. So 86% of our plastics and cardboard is being incinerated. You know, it's an astonishing figure. The only recycling that's going on is when people are filling their cars up with cardboard and plastics and taking it to the local tip.
Is this beautiful city now dirtier and more chaotic than it was? Has it you know, affected the visual experience of living there?
It has, and the closer you go into the inner city, the worse it gets. I mean, visitors coming to Birmingham from abroad, or business leaders and people looking to invest in the region, you know, we want to keep talking Birmingham up. It's a brilliant city, fantastic people. This is holding us back, and it's been a year. The council have got to get back around the table and sort out a resolution to it, because if we don't, we're going to end up talking about this in 12 months' time again. It's just going to go on.
And can you tell us who's at fault? What exactly is going on, Richard? What is the problem?
Right, so I'm not directly behind the negotiating table, of course, because, well, there isn't a negotiating table, but we're the opposition group. But what we understand is that there's 144 driver team leaders who are holding, well, not all of them, but most of them have apparently agreed to the new role. They've been offered by the council. Others have taken VR or alternative jobs within the council. So we're talking about, you know, a small number of people, basically, who are holding out at the moment. And you know, when you think Birmingham's got a 1.15 million population, you know, we're down to 70 or 80 driver team leaders who are, you know, holding out for more money, basically.
It's utter madness. More power to you, Richard, for talking up your great, great city, which has an unbelievable history and in the right hands, politically, a great future as well. We'll stay in touch with you about this, if that's OK. Over 400 days they've had strikes, an all-out strike a year ago. Richard Parkin is a Birmingham councillor, Conservatives, Sutton, Redicap. And honestly, I love Birmingham so much, and the people and the hospitality, the restaurants, you name it, the canals, so much to celebrate. But the bins are piling up. This is embarrassing. Broken Britain. Neil is in Buckinghamshire, which is another nice part of the country. Good morning, Neil.
Morning, Mark. How you doing? All right?
I'm very well, top man. Listen, we need to talk about everything, don't we? Energy bills, the cost of putting petrol in your car. If Rachel Reeves doesn't do a U-turn, it's going to be a nightmare. What do you think about all this?
Well, the thing is, she's getting a bit of a kick in, which is quite rightly so, but it all started with the Tories, and they're getting off lightly.
Yeah.
Theresa May brought the net zero policy in after 90 minutes discussion in the House of Parliament.
Yeah.
She needs to take responsibility for this, and you should be getting her on it and let her explain her actions, because it's all started from them.
Neil, you're right about that. You're right about that, Neil. And you know your facts, and you've got the history of it. Theresa May, her chancellor at the time, Neil. Do you remember Phil Hammond, spreadsheet Phil? He told her that this target would cost the country £1 trillion, and a so-called Conservative Prime Minister said, "No problem. Where do I sign?" £1 trillion, Neil.
Yeah. She has got away lightly, and you know everybody should be blaming her, because Ed Miliband wouldn't even dream of this. He wouldn't know how to start it. He's just carrying it on and adding it on. You need infrastructure. We haven't got it. We will never have it in our lifetime. But it's going to bankrupt the country.
And you're right, because what you've said there, what Theresa May did is something that Ed Miliband could only dream of.
Exactly. But he's an idiot. Couldn't think of things like this. So next time you get a Tory on, give them hell about it, because it's their fault.
Neil, can we clip that? And I'm going to play it to my next Tory guest. Neil, more power to you. Neil, what's happening in your day? What are you up to?
Well, I work for a water company, so I've got a van. I get up early in the morning. I don't pay for my diesel because it's company, but I still am in the pinch when I drive my own car because I live in a village. 1 bus a day. How do I get to anywhere?
Well, that's exactly it. Neil, you put in more than you take out. We salute you. Thank you for a brilliant call. And you're right to drag the Tories over hot coals in regard to net zero. It all started under Theresa May. Live in the studio, the Queen of Talk.
Dun, dun.
Metaphorically and literally. I know, because it's written down. I've seen the contract. Julia Hartley-Brewer, how are you?
I'm very well.
Did you know there's a beer which is called JHB?
I do know that. I have a bottle of it.
Yeah. And when I drink a few pints of that, you begin to make sense. I start agreeing with you.
Beer goggles have always worked for me over the years. I'm not going to lie, Mark.
I've met your other half.
Anyway, yes, so much to talk about on the show today. This Al Quds March. I mean, what planet is that? Would that anyone think that march would be allowed? HMS Dragon finally getting out Portsmouth. Oh, nice of them to bother. The war will probably be over by the time they get to Cyprus.
Well, don't you think that Royal Caribbean or P&O could commission a boat a bit more quickly than that?
It's just, it was like, we did the work in 6 days. It normally takes 6 weeks. Well, why don't you normally do it in 6 days then? Sorry, let's work around the clock a bit more.
And we don't blame, it's like the NHS, we don't blame the actual, soldiers and all the rest of it.